Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video all about Fury of Dracula. No gameplay for you today. We've got a nice little discussion all about Fury of Dracula, specifically the Immortal update that's coming very soon to the game. And I'm not alone in this discussion. I've got a couple of excellent people alongside me. I know this has been recorded for the Nomad Games social media and YouTube as well, and maybe some people might have stumbled across this video on my channel. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm Scot-sword. I'm one of the main members of the Fury of Dracula Digital Edition community. I've been in the community for just over 2 years, and for the majority of that time, I've been recording gameplay for YouTube and also some guide videos and the like. And I've also been one of the main people organizing tournaments. We've run 4 tournaments since October of 2022. We've got another one on the way very soon. So yeah, it's all busy over there. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave links in the description where you can come and find us. Join the Nomad Discord if you haven't already, and you'll find us on there. So alongside me, I've got two amazing people from Nomad Games themselves to talk about the Immortal update. First of all, we've got Tom, the Ancient One. Hello, Tom.
Hey, yeah, people might recognize me from the Nomad Discord. I am the marketing guy over at Nomad Games. So anything that's public facing, such as this, is my domain. So I'm here to talk everything about the beta update and how excited we are to roll it out.
You are the public face of Nomad. That's basically
Yes, yeah.
very, very good. And also alongside us, we've got Eredra. Hello, Eredra.
Hello, I'm one of the developers working on Fury of Dracula Immortal update. Very excited to talk about loads of the changes we've been implementing over the last few weeks.
Absolutely. There you go. That's who we are. So yeah, we're gonna go into it. We're gonna later on in the video we'll go through all the changes. It's gonna be quite extensive. There's a lot of things that have been happening with this update. Am I right in saying that this is the biggest update ever to the game since it was its initial release back in when did it come out? 2019?
I definitely looking at the full change log because we've got the full list of everything that's currently as of recording, been changed in the beta version. And I'd be impressed if this isn't the biggest update that we've done.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't remember anything anywhere near this level all in one go, at the very least,
Yeah.
if you can call it that. I know we've been doing multiple batches for the update, one after another, but when it is released to the public branch on Steam, this should be the largest update.
Very good. Very, very exciting times. Yes, if people don't know, the Immortal update is already available, but as an open beta, and we'll get into reasons why it's a beta later on. So it's only available on Steam currently, but obviously, hopefully in the future, it will be rolled out across everything, across all the platforms. So the first I wanted to get into, some people may or may not know, Tom, you came onto my channel just around a year ago, and we played a little game of Fury of Dracula, and we were chatting about different things. And as one of the comments actually, and I completely agree with that comment on that video, that you were very, very candid in the way that you spoke about, how Nomad Games operates, and obviously at that time, you couldn't say for any certainty when there'd be an update to the game.
Yep.
So for people who haven't seen that video, can you give like a very, very sort of quick summary in terms of how Nomad Games sort of operates in terms of this sort of, when you're making these sort of decisions? And then
Yep.
as a follow-up, what has changed in the last 12 months? Why is now, the spring of 2024, why is that the time to be releasing this update?
Fair. I can do that. So basically, to give a bit of an overview, as the sole person in charge of communications for Nomad, it's very easy for me to ensure that everything that goes out externally comes directly from me. So when it comes to honesty and transparency in what we can do, my general rule is if there's something that we can talk about, I'll talk about it. If there's a reason that we can't talk about it, obviously I won't talk about it, but I can at least do my best to explain the reasoning behind why we can't talk about it. So for Fury of Dracula, back when we recorded that video, we were in a situation as a studio where we had a number of different projects that we were working on. We were working on Board Game Cafe in the background, and our priority list still had Fury of Dracula on it, but there were a number of other priorities that were basically higher than Fury of Dracula at that point. So me turning around and saying, "Oh, we're definitely going to make an update to Fury of Dracula, at that point, we didn't know whether or not we'd be able to do that. We didn't know that we'd be able to come back to it. So I didn't want to turn around and say, oh, yeah, we'll definitely make an update in the future. But I also wanted to be clear that we weren't going to turn around and say, oh, we're never going to do an update for Fury of Dracula. Like, there's certain games in our catalogue that I will be honest and say, based on the number of people that are playing it, based on the number of installs, based on the number of people that have bought expansions or extra content, or generally how it does in sales, it's not worth it to us as a studio to put the time and effort into what it would take to update that game. Fury of Dracula wasn't in that state, and I think that's what I was very clear about. I was like, look, I'm not saying that we are going to update it. I'm not saying that we're not going to update it, but because of how much the community have supported the game, how well it does in terms of still getting active players, it means that it is actually available as something that we could come back and work on. And then again, to be completely transparent, we're still working behind the scenes, very much on Board Game Cafe. We're working on a number of different projects here at Nomad that I can't fully talk about yet, which seems to always be the case. But we're basically working on getting some projects up off the ground at the moment, as well as Board Game Cafe. And while we're figuring out more design stuff and getting the initial work done, it means that certain parts of our team here at Nomad, again, we're a very small team, that there's certain parts of our team where we were able to sit down and say, okay, what do we want to work on for the next month, 2 months? We said, well, while we don't have anything that's super pressing and we are currently busy with other aspects of the business, could we spend some time on some of our older games? We're like, yeah, actually, we could do that. So we sat down, looked at that priority list, and said, okay, you know what? Based on how the community's playing, all that information, is it worth it coming back and updating Fury of Dracula? And eventually the decision was made. Yeah, I think it is worth it to come back to Fury of Dracula. So that's why this time, like, we realized that it's been a long time since there was a previous update for Fury of Dracula. So a lot of people will be wondering, why is it happening now? And it's just things lined up right, and things lined up in the background for Fury of Dracula itself that meant that we could justify doing this Immortal update. So I realise I've rambled on for longer than I expected to, but hopefully that answers it in much more detail.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair answer. So just in terms of like basic summary, there was that window of opportunity, and the three of us and the community and everything, we took full advantage of that window of opportunity when it arose.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay, that's a very, very, very fair summary of that. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so then for you, Eredra, can you tell us a little bit in terms of like your involvement with the project? Were you originally involved with, producing Fury of Dracula at the very beginning when the digital edition was first released? If so, then what was it like to return to it? If you weren't, what was it like coming onto a project that you weren't initially involved with? What were the trials and tribulations that you had to deal with? Because obviously, we've been talking about it off camera, obviously, but yeah, it's not the simplest of game to take a look at.
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't, unfortunately. But yeah, I was on the original team which developed Fury of Dracula way back when in 2019. I will say that I believe the majority of developers who did work on it back then are no longer at Nomad.
Yeah.
And returning to it was a joy because I've always really wanted to do that. Because I really think it deserves an update, as much as I was not able to go back and do so, unfortunately, until now. But while it was also a joy, it was also, kind of a window back in time for me to look back on what I did more than 4 years ago now. And as a developer, I see how I've grown since then, or at least I think I have, because stuff and coding that was in the game back then, I've probably improved on. I can see it for myself at least. And just for clarity, I've not worked on this update alone. There's, two other developers that have been working on it with me, primarily. And I mean, I speak for myself at least, but I'm proud of what we've done so far at least.
The community response has been fantastic and very, very positive all round. And obviously we've been, interacting, on Discord, behind the scenes, it's all been extremely positive from all sides. So it's been, yeah, that's been fantastic. And it's great too, like, 'cause I think this thing, like you're saying, that the community for the game has grown. So it's fantastic to hear that as a company and also as an individual developer that you've been able to grow with the game. That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, it is nice. I will say that throughout the time since at least even the last update, or when I stopped working on Fury of Dracula, I've always been impressed and pleasantly surprised whenever I get a notification on the Nomad Discord, people looking for Fury almost every day. It's very heartwarming, to be honest, because it is my first game release as a developer individually, at least. So it's always a pleasure to see that.
Is it a game that you were familiar with prior to developing it? Was it a board game that you had actually personally played? Were you aware of it before joining Nomad?
No, actually, I was not aware of the board game itself before joining Nomad. I only made aware of it before, as I joined the company. But we did play it a lot before development. Although, as you alluded to before, the rules are somewhat ambiguous, so we weren't playing them correctly ourselves. So it's always a struggle, really, because I'm not I haven't gauged how popular it is outside of digital edition. I assume relatively popular, but there's not that many resources online where I could confirm rules, or interpretations of rules and very specific interactions.
Yeah.
Some of which I suppose we'll discuss later when we get to individual changes.
Absolutely. There's quite a community on Board Game Geek, where there's a lot of discussion about the rules, and there's obviously, then you can imagine, a lot of new players getting the game and having doubts about how things are played. And obviously within then the digital edition community, there are a lot of people who are maybe not very familiar with the board game. Someone like me, for example, I have the physical board game, but I think I've only played it once because I took it to my board game group and they hated it. So I'm like, right, I'm never playing this again, even though I really want to. So there are a lot of people who, for various reasons, have not been able to play the physical version very much. So they come into the digital edition, and then within that community, we have discussions about rules, if things have been interpreted, correctly, incorrectly. But then, as I've said, off camera, I do not envy, the job of you and the other developers who are in charge of, putting together the initial release of Fury of Dracula, let alone the update, because just trying to pour through the rules sometimes, and there are inconsistencies everywhere, and some interactions are not accounted for. Again, that's always kind of going to happen, though, when you've got a bigger player base, and because of the great thing with the digital edition of the game is you can play more frequently. So you can learn the game quicker, play against different people, and meta develops. But then because of that, it's more likely that these interactions and things are highlighted, and then even more so in in tournament situations where emotions are already running high, and then suddenly you get a bug that breaks the game or an interaction you don't expect, and then people maybe get a little bit annoyed about it. But as I said, I do not envy your job trying to put all that together, because it is a little bit of a minefield. And there's rules that I didn't even know, because I played so much of the digital edition, I learned so many of the rules through it. It was only when I looked at the rules reference and went, oh, that's a rule? I didn't know that. And it's just, there's so much stuff that's kind of hidden from you sometimes. So, no, in general, yeah, it's a learning experience altogether, with the game.
Yeah, it is a bit of a daunting task, and it was when I developed the game originally, more than 4 years ago, and even now. It's just a case of when you play in the physical version, you can kind of house rule it, and you can just say amongst your group of friends, like, well, we'll just play it like this. The rules don't explicitly say this, but we'll just play it like this.
Yeah.
But with the digital edition, we tell you how to play the game effectively, which is very scary when the rules themselves are not exactly clear.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit daunting on that one.
And for the rules which are a little bit more ambiguous, you're always gonna, it's almost like a lose-lose situation. You're always gonna have some people who are gonna fall on the side of, no, it's not done that way, it should be this rule, or the other. And just eventually you just have to make decisions. Just go, we're doing it this way. That's
Yeah.
our interpretation of it. That's what we're doing.
Or we can implement a house rule sometimes. Like
True.
if it's unclear which way and we think, oh, this is a proper like 50-50 situation, sometimes we can implement a house rule so that at least those two sides have the ability to choose which way they want to do it.
Yeah, indeed. Giving options is always great. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of people now in the community, we'll talk about various changes, but one of them in particular in terms of how the trail moves. As a digital edition community, we've grown so accustomed to that rule. There are now people in the community who then play the game in real life and they implement the digital edition interpretation, which I find really interesting. They just got so used to it.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, yeah, with board games, as long as you give people options, then people will be happy with it. In terms of a community, in terms of organizing tournaments, well, then we have to pick a line or a side, and we're going to go with it that way. But in general, I think because as I said, the game has quite a following, but it's almost like comes like as a cult following because obviously it's been out of print so many times. Even like now, it's not in print because the fourth edition was in print for maybe a year or two, and then it disappeared. So the people who play the game are very passionate about it. But it's not obviously something like a Wingspan or something like that, where it's every board game geek post you see on like social media, there are people playing Wingspan.
Yeah.
You're not going to see everybody playing Fury of Dracula. It warms my heart every time people are like, I got Fury of Dracula in my collection. I'm like, oh, well done.
Yeah, it's definitely got that cult status. I definitely agree with that. I think it while it doesn't have that mass appeal of something like Wingspan, I think the combination of the mechanics and the theme means that someone who does really like it is going to really like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important just to ask those a few questions at the beginning, just because, especially for you, the questions for you, Tom, because I see it sometimes when people come into the community, and I don't think they fully understand, the situation in terms of, how Nomad operates and the timescale for these updates and all this sort of thing. And I see
Yeah.
them, they pop in and they rant about something, then they disappear. We never see them again.
Yeah.
So I think just sort of setting that out at the beginning and explaining both of your roles involved with the project, I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that I've not previously touched on publicly when it comes to Fury of Dracula and the beta update is obviously here at Nomad, we've got multiple projects on the go all at the same time. And while there are a lot of updates rolling out as part of this Immortal update, I don't want people to get the impression that this is going to be the cadence of Fury of Dracula updates going forwards. Like, we are going to, at some point, have to draw a line in the sand and say, cool, we've now rolled out the Immortal update. We'll probably put out some further fixes based on what people say, but there will come a point where we'll have to say, okay, cool, we've implemented all of these cool fixes. We've got the game to a state where we're happy with it. And then be clear and transparent about what the future of Fury of Dracula is at that point.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, just as a general thing for people who are maybe not familiar with like the Discord community and stuff, I'd recommend everybody joins it because one thing I'd really praise you guys on is that level of communication is there. Not just I know privately you and I talk a lot more, but publicly there's a lot of communication within. It's very transparent in terms of obviously there are certain things you can't reveal for obvious reasons, but you're not we can all think of I'm not just video game companies, but companies in general who will just give you the product and then go, right, that's it, you got it now, right, we're leaving, bye, and then you never hear from them again. Whereas there's very much a sense of like you are contactable, you take feedback on board, and I've always said like communication is the key thing. As long as there's communication, that's fine. If the answer to the question is we can't do this because A, it's too complicated, or we haven't got time, or prioritize other things, perfect.
Yeah,
that's absolutely fine, and I will fully respect that. And I would like to think that everybody else in the community would be the same, even if we don't agree with it. You're the ones who've got your livelihoods on the line for this. So as long as there's communication, that's important.
Like, I don't want people to think that because we've said, oh, we're not gonna do any more updates after this, that they can't ask for more updates, because part of the reason that this update, the Immortal update, is happening in the first place is because over the last 4 years, people have been joining the Discord, people have been on social media, and they've been like, oh, you know what, I'd really appreciate if this was fixed in Fury of Dracula, or if this was changed. or if this was included. And like I said previous,
Yeah.
it's partly because of all of that community feedback and that community discussion that we were able to make the call and say, you know what, we should go back to Fury of Dracula compared to something like our earlier fighting fantasy games. Like occasionally we'll get people pop up and say, oh, I've noticed this bug or this issue, and like we have gone back to fix things like that. But compared to the amount of people that came to us and said, you know what, we want to see these updates or these changes in Fury of Dracula, like it massively impacts our decision making here at Nomad.
Yeah, just to kind of tangentially relate to that, during the Immortal update, it's been incredibly valuable for me, especially individually, getting feedback on the various patches which have been rolling out, on new features which have been released or fixes which have been implemented, and just getting community feedback about what they think might be needed on top of that, or how a regression issue has been introduced. Like, it's been very quick and it's been very appreciated, so that I can get on and fix those as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this cyclic sort of relationship, right? If as a community we see you being very communicative and very responsive, then in return we will be more responsive, and then you'll be more responsive, and it just kind of builds from that. But yeah, as long, as I said, I always view on the idea of being proactive, even if you can't do certain things, or if you have to admit we can't do that. As long as there's communication and people are willing to be involved with the process, even if the game is not 100% perfect in somebody's eyes, that they keep being passionate about it and playing it, then it may well change in the future. Just complaining and then not participating, in that is not going to change things, I don't think.
Yeah.
Alrighty, shall we talk about the update? So I guess very quickly before we do that, why a beta? Why, instead of releasing it fully across all the platforms, why did you decide we're going to have an open beta but on Steam only? What was the...
I think we can probably divide that between my view on it, which is the marketing and publishing side of it, and then you can take the development side of it. So from my point of view as the marketing person here at Nomad, it makes more sense for us to do a beta based on the community that we have for Fury of Dracula. I think that's the biggest thing from my point of view, because letting people opt into a beta requires you to have a certain level of trust, but it's almost a level of acceptance that the people who are going to play this beta are willing to go above and beyond what is expected of an average player. Like, the average player is just going to not check out the news updates. They're not going to check out the Discord. They are, even though they should, they're just going to look at the game in their Steam library, open it up, play it, and be like, cool, I've finished playing. But adding the ability to roll it out as a public beta means that we can directly make changes to the game a lot quicker, and without having to worry about, oh, okay, we need to make sure, like, it'd be a very different story if we had spent the last month working on the Immortal update without it being a beta, because there would be no transparency, there'd be no community feedback, there'd be none of that back and forth that's so important for not only showing the community that we're still working on the game, but showing that we're listening actively to their feedback. So I think that's the main reason for us to do a public beta. And like I said, it's knowing that we have that community that are so excited for an update that they're willing to put up with any potential issues that would come up in the beta. Like, something that we've been completely transparent about is that this is an open beta because we're not expecting it to be completely bug free. If anything, we're expecting it to have more bugs in it than we would the public release of the game. But we also know that because the community is so dedicated and is so willing to put in the time and play through whatever bugs might arise, we can go to them and say, look, here's earlier access to the Immortal update than some other developers might potentially give you. We're doing this so that you can give us feedback, and we're doing this to be as transparent as a studio as possible when it comes to what we're working on behind the scenes. So yeah, that's basically how I view it from my side.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. It's a lot of my perspective as well, but just something extra is to drill down on the aspect of, because it's a beta, we kind of afford our players a little bit more of a expectation curbing, to put it in a strange way, is that if you can opt into the beta, then you kind of have this aura of, well, maybe this is not going to be, bug free. Whereas if we just rolled it out, to the default branch, and then players who maybe aren't active on the Discord or active in any other way on the community, they just log in and play the game. They'll notice, oh, well, this is cool, but now this thing is broken. Whereas with the beta, yeah, we do get that often back and forth with the community, and hopefully it's not too much of an issue when the game breaks. A good example was when we implemented the new combat updates. I think if you did something specific with planned ambush, I believe it just hung the game.
Yep.
When that was introduced. But since it was a beta, it's, I suppose, not exactly more acceptable, but I suppose it's more within expectations at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Additionally, just the fact that if it's a beta, there is, yeah, I wouldn't say that much of an expectation on players to help report bugs, but I believe it encourages it a bit more, which is always helpful for, I'd say, any studio to just get more feedback about what's going on in their game.
Yeah,
that's pretty much my perspective.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with everything that you two said, and also the fact that, to make it clear, when we have been giving you feedback, I've been shocked, but like obviously in a positive way, the swiftness in that the bugs that have now been created because of certain things changing, how quickly you have responded to the feedback, and suddenly been like a day or two later, boom, here we go, here's an update, that problem's fixed, and it's just been this real, like, I've been just the sheer pace and speed of getting these things changed has been, phenomenal. I think that really helps the community aspect too, because if we see from our side as a player, I've reported a bug on this beta, and then within, say, 48 hours-ish, depending on the issue, of course, it's been fixed, then you're even more engaged in the process. And I've been a little bit of a bit of a troublemaker in my games. I've actively tried to go out to break the game to see if any of these bugs are still persistent, but I haven't found any yet. So it's a lot of things.
That is good. That is very appreciated that you, I guess, ruin your game for the other opponent, but it's really useful for us. It's very good.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, they fixed that bug about Dracula moving beside dead hunters, right? I'm gonna go beside a dead hunter and see if it reveals me or not. I might die,
Yeah.
but we'll see. Because it's really cool to see too. There's so many. I mean, I'm looking at the log, the change log just now, and there's just so many things I can't even keep track anymore of all these changes. Even some things I don't even, I hadn't even noticed there'd been changes because there's so much stuff.
I think something else.
See them. Yeah,
I think something else that's worth pointing out is the fact that we're able to, at least, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but one of the reasons I feel like we're able to make those changes so quickly and be able to implement those fixes is because the way that the community has come around to reporting bugs and reporting issues, where so many of the community are either recording their games as they're playing them or handing over the logs on the Discord. It means that, I'm assuming from a developer point of view, it's so much easier to recognize all of the things that are potentially impacting that situation rather than some of the other bug reports we get for other games in the past where people have said, I've done this and the game's broken. It's like, well, that's not clear what's gone wrong. Whereas if you have a video that shows, especially if it's a online multiplayer video where you've got both players' perspectives, and you can see, okay, this is exactly where a desync has happened, for example. We can then open up a developer build and say, okay, let's try and do that on our internal build and see what's happening behind the scenes that causes that issue, and then that issue can be fixed.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. I've got a quick example as well. Again, going back to the combat changes where we made all players pick their cards simultaneously in an online match.
Mm.
The issue which caused a progression blocker, which just stopped the game from progressing, was discovered extremely quickly thanks to recordings by Scot-sword and descriptions from other members of the community in the Nomad Discord, where they both mentioned that planned ambush was used, and that was the culprit. I would not have found it anywhere near as quickly if it wasn't displayed that planned ambush was used in the combat, for sure. So it's always helpful.
I was just to say, like, that's been a really sort of recent shift in the community in terms of the sheer amount of games that have been recorded now. There's been a lot. I have to say, I won't name everybody individually, but people know who they are. If I'm talking about you. A lot of new members of the community who have come in and have just instantly gone, "Yep, I'm happy to record." Firstly, just for promoting the game, but also then, identifying bugs as a tournament organizer. It helps me if there's if a bug does occur, if there's footage that I can then determine how we deal with the game, but then also then, as you said, for feedback from developer perspective. It's there's so much more data to pull from now.
Yeah.
It's just it's fantastic. Not only then, also then you've got other people recording. You can hear different voices and not just hear me drone on about the game all the time. All right. Unless there's anything else on that topic, shall we have a look at the log and we can go through it? Is there anywhere in particular you want to start, or are we just going to go from top to bottom?
I think we might as well just go from top to bottom.
Yeah,
I'm cool with that.
Cool. Okay, so for people who are watching this on YouTube, I'll change the screen so now you can see it. It's not fancy, it's just a notepad document, a text file. This is the list. I will leave links in the comments to the proper announcement that Tom has put together for Steam, where you have all the changes listed, but with the amazing artwork from the game. Okie dokie. I don't know who's going to start. Do we just run through it? What do you? I don't mind. We do this.
I think we just run through it. So starting off with the Dracula can now view discarded face down in.
Oh. Nope.
Oh,
there's more. There's more.
All right.
There's so much stuff for the added section.
Let's be as non-chaotic as possible and literally just go through the list one by one.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like the best idea. So first up, added vampire encounter card health to the trail on the cards themselves. So this is more of a user interface displaying information to the player change. So it isn't actually a gameplay change as such. Like, this information was previously accessible, but it's now much more accessible, if I'm thinking correctly.
Well, the vampire health, you can definitely see it, especially when you in combat. But after you exited combat and in the main game, if the vampire still survives, I don't believe there was a way to view the health at all in the map screen. No, but so it really was just adding to the bookkeeping, which you need to do for the game, which is somewhat part of the game, but this is not one of them, because in the physical edition, you should just be able to look over and see at the encounter card how many damage tokens I believe the vampire has.
Yep.
But that was just not previously available until now. And it does, I believe it should always show the vampire, even in the discard pile. I think it was pointed out in a video.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, when they go to the discard, their health still remains as the health when they were like staked or if they matured or something.
Yeah, I want to say that was not exactly like intended, but I suppose it does. Well, I can guarantee it does get reset.
Okay, that's the main thing I was worried about. I was like, I don't want this one health vampire to come back. a very useless vampire. No, I agree. It's just purely. This is not a huge change. I'm thinking about it from a player's perspective, but it's just the ease that okay, that vampire has that number of health, and then it might determine which hunter fights it and all this sort of stuff. it just means that there's one less thing to remember. And I know memory is a big part of this game, even though you can make notes, but as you said, in the physical board game, you can just look across, or you can just ask
Yeah.
Dracula, how much health does that vampire have? Whereas once you're out of combat, you have no idea. And I've
Yeah.
seen it before where people are using heroic leap on vampires which have 6 health, and then suddenly like, oh, why didn't it die? It's like it has 1 health left, but you don't know that until you go into combat. So again, it's not groundbreaking change, but it's just still that nice little touch that it's there.
Yeah,
And
it's
that
like
can go
quality of
back.
life. We're not expecting people to like. There are things that you have to remember when you're playing Fury of Dracula. This isn't one of them.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, next one. Really exciting change for me. I thought this was really cool. I was
I
so
can talk about
happy.
this one.
So happy.
So yeah, it's adding the Discord icon to the main menu that links to the Nomad Games Discord page. So previously this wasn't in the game, and this is something that we've tried to include going forwards. And since we originally launched Fury of Dracula, it's just a link to the Discord because we know that that's the way a lot of people either discuss games nowadays or look for advice or tips. And it's just a great way to get involved with the community. So having that link straight within the game is just really good. And also, more people in our Discord means more people see the stuff that I'm shouting about. So I'm always happy with that.
Plug.
Exactly.
Yeah. I saw it. It was like, again, to bring up another board game, but like Wingspan has the digital edition of the game. And that was something that I noticed when I went into that app. It was like, boom, right on the main menu. There's the link
Yeah.
right there. And you can't miss it.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I found the Discord originally. It was after 2 years ago. You can put like Quincy Morris and say with me, I put links in my descriptions for the Discord. But if you don't set up the link correctly, it can expire, and there are people who are trying to click the link, but then it doesn't work, and then they might give up. So just having it there, like front and center, it's just you're gonna see. I think within the first couple of days of the beta being announced, there were like I saw people coming into the community who had never been in the community before.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it made an impact instantly. Okay. Next one. Added a house rule for Dracula to choose a location or power card to place on trail. Okay, right. So this is
The big one.
the big one, the huge one. So for people who don't know, because a lot of people might not realize how Digital Edition works, or maybe they know Digital Edition, but they don't know the physical game. So the way that Dracula's movement phase works is that Dracula should slide the trail first, and therefore if an encounter falls or encounters fall off the edge of the trail, they get to mature, and then the location becomes available for Dracula, and then Dracula takes the move. The way the Digital Edition was always done was the reverse, that Dracula moves first, and then the trail slides, then the thing falls off the edge. I don't know, if I was designing the game, I personally think the original Digital Edition implementation would be the way that I would design it, but I guess that's not the question. The question is, how is the physical board game done? And the physical board game is done where everything slides, and then Dracula puts the encounter down. So we can talk about it from a developer perspective, but from a player perspective, this is massive. It's not going to change the speed at which things mature. They still take the same number of turns to mature, but it's the fact that Dracula now has more options. Dracula can mature things before moving. So I'm just thinking of like loads of scenarios in my head. Like if you get a hoax to mature, you can then pick the Dracula event card that you want from the hoax before you move, because that might influence your move. If you mature a vampire and it wipes those locations on the trail, and then you're able to return to one of those removed locations. Rather before where you had to move somewhere else and then all those locations got removed. It's just going to it means that Dracula has more options to do things. There's also then, if you're talking to Zakacek, one of the other members of the community, talking about layers, that's then a completely different ball game, right? You can now layer something before moving into the layer rather than the reverse, so the circles that you can create on the map are much smaller. It should put more, and then wolf form comes off the trail 1 turn earlier. All the power cards come off the trail 1 turn earlier, so it means then hunters are under more pressure if Dracula is able to wolf form basically more frequently. And I think it'll create. And there's also other things too, where as a hunter player, I try to do things where if I'm forcing Dracula, say, to an extremity location like Spain or Iberia, as an example, Dracula can escape in either direction from sea that way. But if there's a sea space like Mediterranean that's already on the board, I can keep Dracula trapped long enough so when Dracula goes to sea, he'll be forced to go South Atlantic and then North Atlantic. He can't return to Mediterranean because he's already on the trail. because now Mediterranean will fall off the trail one turn sooner, Dracula could then potentially time it and then go either direction, which means that hunters are under more pressure to either engage in combat quicker with Dracula before he escapes the sea, or then they need more important event cards like Muddy Trail Hypnosis to find him. So it just puts hunters under more pressure, and gives Dracula more options, which is not a bad thing.
I want to just address. Sorry, I just want to address probably a common question which we might get about this house rule, in that why is it house rule, and not just part of the main game, and we make the original version of the digital edition's implementation make that house rule instead, because now this house rule is the only house rule where it's the actual version of the board game's rules, and it doesn't really make much sense. But the reason we chose to do it like this, if we're being perfectly clear, is because it saved time, which might sound like a bad reason, but it did allow us to do more changes and look at things quicker. The reason it was faster to implement like this, and I suppose, the reason it was faster to implement like this was because of tutorials and how the original tutorial does it like this, and it's all based around the fact that this happens. If we changed it to the base game, we'd have to remake a lot of the tutorials. Now, maybe at this point, you might say tutorials are not that useful because the game's, and it's been out for a while, but we want to make sure that it's all up to date. So we can now technically say that the tutorials are correct, but the game still has the option to be played in the way that the physical edition intended. So maybe it's not the best reason, but it's the reason it's the decision we went with.
That's interesting. I never even considered tutorials, like the impact of these changes on tutorials. I never even thought about it before, but it makes perfect sense because it does explain in the tutorial about how the way the Dracula movement phase works.
Yeah.
And there's also the other thing too, like there'll be players who are so used to digital edition that they probably don't even know that in physical edition it's the other way round. So it means they can stay with that option. They're not suddenly going into the game and going, "Whoa, what's happened to the trail? Why is it all moving differently?" Is that nice? You can opt in and out of it.
Yeah, like if you care enough to go into the house rules, you probably care enough to go, okay, I understand what difference this is going to make to the game and the reason that this is here compared to the physical game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised about, because when I initially looked at a lot of the rules for Fury of Dracula and how the advanced rules, they came off as something that was quite optional. But then after learning about how I think a lot of the tournaments are done in the digital edition now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they always have all advanced rules enabled.
Yeah.
Yeah, which to me was a bit strange, but it makes perfect sense now. Kind of in relation to this new sliding trail method, where Dracula was just weaker, I suppose.
Yeah.
Without this, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting for us as a community how it's going to affect win rate. So for people who don't know, over the last now technically 4 tournaments that we've done, the win rate between Hunters and Dracula have pretty much been 50-50, which is really surprising, to be honest, given the asymmetry in the game and different levels. There are some theories where at very, very high level of play, Hunters win more frequently than Dracula, just because even if you're a very good Dracula player, if you're against a Hunter player who's able to manipulate all of their events and things correctly, it's almost impossible for the Hunters to lose. There are so many factors in the game, but that is often what it feels like. Whereas Dracula, if you're playing against a really good Hunter player, you're on this it's so hard to win. And you have to play flawlessly the entire game. If you make one mistake, you lose. Whereas Hunters can make mistakes and still win. It's kind of like this weird thing. So yeah, you need to have the advanced rules turned on because Dracula needs these additional powers. It's going to be really fascinating to see with this trail change how that's going to shift in terms of win rate. Is Dracula suddenly going to become much stronger because of this? It definitely gives Dracula more options. But then I think at the low levels of play, I don't think you're going to see a difference. I think your casual or newer Dracula player, I don't think it's going to be affected too much by this, depending on what type of Hunter player they're against. I think for the very, very high levels, it will give Dracula not the edge over the Hunters, but give, as I said, more options. And that's what Dracula needs. If we find that Dracula is really, really powerful because of this, then there are other ways that we can nerf him in terms of, like, from a tournament perspective. We can reduce, influence from rumor tokens and the Fury of Dracula, influence, all that sort of stuff. There are other ways that we can nerf him. So we're just going to test it out and just see what happens, and I'll just look at the data, and we'll work out as a community what is the right sort of balance between the two.
We definitely appreciate all that data on our end as well. Like, it definitely helps us make decisions on what needs changing, or if anything does need changing, or more house rules need adding.
Yeah, I think the thing too is, like, it's not about, this is a huge buff to Dracula. That's obvious, but it's the changes are not about buffing Dracula, as we were talking about. It's like, let's try and make it more like the physical game. And if it turns out then the two sides are a little bit imbalanced, all right, then we'll find ways of adjusting it from our side, from a player side, or with our new house rules or whatever. I'm not stressing out right now about Dracula being potentially overpowered and all this sort of thing. The strength of the hunter still remains, and it's on the player to use these options correctly. It's not just like this blanket buff that benefits all players, if that makes sense.
Like, we've not just given Dracula more health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think this is a better way to, if you are thinking about buffing a character, you want to think about it, this is better. It's more interactive. You're not just giving this across the board buff. You're trying to create a more interactive, more dynamic playing experience. And then it also makes then the opponent or opponents from the hunter's perspective think a lot more. And that's only going to benefit the community and the game, and make the experience of watching it and playing it more exciting. So yeah, massive change, but yeah, it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is another house rule. This one courtesy of Quincy Morris. It was something that he suggested a long time ago in a video, and I was like, oh, I like that idea. Let's try and implement that. So it's a bit of a little bit more of a silly one. It's maybe not for serious tournament play, but we'll maybe see what we can do about it. But I think it can create a little bit of carnage in more casual games. So if you don't know, the Dark Claw is one of Dracula's power cards. Dracula expends 2 health, or basically takes 2 damage, but gets 5 more encounter cards. There's now this additional house rule where Dracula will take the 5 encounter cards and take the top card of the event deck. If it's a hunter card, it gets discarded. If it's a Dracula card, he gets to keep it. So the reason why this is implemented is because as a community, once our meta has developed, night supplies are very, very rare. The meta that's developed is, during the first week, hunters stay still, they do not move, and they just supply. And then at night, they're doing trades, they're organizing their ticket economy, all that sort of thing. So night supplies are very rare, unless you've got Mystic Research in play, or unless the hunters are getting desperate and they need to get more events. And also hoax matures are also not very likely. So because of that, Dracula doesn't get many events, which is a bit of a shame. That's a huge sort of part of the game that is very rarely accessed. So we've got this little house rule where it means then Dracula can maybe get a few more events. I've tried this out a couple of times. It can be quite swingy depending on what event you get. If you get something like a Manuel Hildesheen, yeah, that can flip the game really, really hard to Dracula's favor. But then other times you'll get, I don't know, Sensationalist Press or something. But again, it's giving Dracula a little bit more in terms of options. And Dracula's still having to take damage for it.
Yeah, and I think because it has that almost like built-in variance to it. Again, it's not a straight up buff. You still have the element of, you might not even get a Dracula event. It's still random. But I think having that amount, the balance between variance in Fury of Dracula and absolute certainties is something that we need to keep in mind as both the developers and as the people who are making this game for you guys, the community. Like, if it gets to a point where there are so many things that are outside of the player's control that are just completely random, then it becomes a point of, well, I'm not interested in playing this at a tournament level, or I'm not interested in playing this at a serious level because there's too much that's just out of my control, out of my hands, and it's just a coin flip at that point. But there is still a degree of adding extra elements of randomness that adds that excitement, that adds that tension, where you use Dark Call and it's like, if I get this one particular event, oh, it's really going to turn it around. I'm going to take this risk to use Dark Call in this situation because that's my only out. And then you remember those games where your only out is to use Dark Call and you get just the card you need.
Yeah, indeed. I think from a tournament perspective, I can't imagine at least anytime soon having a tournament where this rule is in place. But
Yeah,
I can easily see playing friendly matches, or maybe like because we normally play 1v1, but doing like community group games where there's at least 200 or 300, maybe even 400, and there's like 5 people around the table or in a Discord call, and then they'll just put this house rule in just for added carnage and unpredictability, and I think it'd be really cool and funny to see what happens.
yeah,
The randomness comes from you don't know what the Dracula event will be. You're drawing from the top of the event deck, so at least you can see the card. You know it's a Hunter event or a Dracula event, and you can choose when to play Dark Call. But obviously
that's true.
you don't know what Dracula event you're going to get. And you're still taking damage from it, and you're not placing an encounter. You're not progressing your trail in that sense. So yeah, again, it gives Dracula more options. There is a risk involved with it. But yeah, if you get something like a manual heal machine like I did in my first game, yeah, that's yeah, pretty rough for the
Pretty
Hunter
tough.
player.
Yeah. I want to say from implementing this. Well, first I chose. Well, we decided to implement this. Honestly, because yeah, we kind of agree with the idea that if people aren't seeing many Dracula event cards, that's a little bit of a shame. And we didn't. Well, to be fair, at the time we didn't really consider any tournament implications because of the fact that it was a house rule, which you can turn on and off, so it's not that big of a concern. But yeah, I think it adds an opportunity for players to say, all right, this game we're going to do, it's going to be a bit of a different feel because of this. That it changes the experience of the game,
Yeah,
if you want.
yeah.
Um, from implementing this, it was a little scary in some areas, particularly because of vampiric influence. Vampiric
Ah,
influence was
yeah,
quite scary, and I know the cards, but because basically you're not really supposed to play anything immediately from drawing. I suppose there's Manuel Hildesheim's ally effect, which is similar.
I mean,
Um,
or the assist one, the one where you can draw the top cards. Yeah, it'd be the assist one, Manuel Hildesheim. Yeah, and then there's some things that yeah, you might get Manuel Hildesheim, get vampiric influence from that, and you have to play it immediately. Yeah,
I didn't consider that. That's a good point.
yeah.
But yeah, it did highlight though, no matter what, that Dracula, a combat at Dracula phase should be night, which was fixed, which is funny.
Yes, yeah, because then if you start moving a weakened hunter around, you might push them into a combat or something, and then yeah, you need that combat to work properly and all this sort of thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
We
mean,
just
even it just goes to show that there's so many interactions which I just can't keep on top of in this game. There's so many different cards interacting with each other all at once, or different phases and whatnot, which is I just completely forgot about Emmanuel Hildesheim's ally, or I guess or assist that you can draw during the Dracula phase.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a crit.
Yeah, it's yeah. Every time I think I've just seen everything with this game, there'll be a new interaction that comes along that I've never seen before, and it just makes it fresh every time. Okay, so the next one we don't have to talk too much about. There's just a house rule where you can control the amount of influence you get from a rumor token if a vampire matures. So the base is 3. Um, this is just here more as a sort of a balancing mechanic. It might be necessary if we discover that Dracula's a little bit strong with the new trail, but we want to keep that mechanic. Then we can maybe reduce the amount of influence he gets from rumor tokens. It was something when I started playing the game, I thought rumor tokens were too strong because it was really annoying if you put a rumor token on the first encounter and then the hunters don't find Dracula from a newspaper report or hide scouts or whatever, and then Dracula basically gets 7 points at the beginning for free. But then I've realized since that rumor tokens are so necessary for Dracula, and that sometimes, for many occasions, even if Dracula gets those 7 points at the beginning, the hunters can still win. They have ways that they can. It's more tense, obviously, but there's ways that they can come back into the game. But this is more, from my perspective, like a balancing mechanic. If we need to drop the influence from rumor token just a little bit to 2 or 1, then we can do it. The option's there.
Yeah, I think it was just a similar vein to the house rule for changing how much influence is gained from a Fury of Dracula, the ability.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, which has been in the game for a while, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just bringing that in line with this. So yeah, I agree. It's a good change. If I do say so myself.
Mhm. So the other one's also massive, and something that hopefully will get expanded at some point. But at the moment, now there is the ability for the players. There's a little toggle button at the bottom. So if you're stuck in, if you're in the combat UI as it says here, or is it now also for multiple card selection? I didn't see that when I played the other
Yeah.
day. Oh, to be fair, I was playing as Dracula, so I wouldn't have seen it. To be fair, so you
Yeah,
can
I
now
was, yeah,
toggle
I
the
had it
map.
yesterday, as of time of recording.
Oh, well,
I've
that's very
added it
exciting.
to
Got to try it
I've
out.
added it to a new dialogue, yeah. So as you kind of point out, it is mostly there for, like, the hunters will see this more often, I imagine,
Yeah.
because they'll see it when they're discarding uh, rail tickets, when they're discarding item cards, when they overdraw, things like that. But it is used in as a general across the board on that dialogue, as we call it, the dialogue where you select cards to play or to ambush with, things like that. Where you can just click a button, it'll hide the dialogue and you can view the map. Yeah, we are looking, hopefully, to expand it as much as possible. Um, just from my point of view, though, it takes a little bit of time because we need to test, like, thoroughly. Does hiding this dialogue ruin anything else? When I say
Mm,
ruin, a while ago when we implemented a lot of the UI, it was kind of done in a way where it was very rigid,
yeah.
where a lot of stuff we didn't intend for players to be able to look through, especially switching player views.
Mm,
There's a lot of issues where if you can do that at any time, that we do need to account and make countermeasures for that. But we've managed to do so, I believe, quite well with the combat and now this new selection dialogue. Um, but if there are issues remaining, we'll hopefully find them soon.
yeah, well, there'll be lots of games coming out soon on it, so we'll be able to find it. Yes, the last game I played since that change was on Dracula, so I did see some prompts which were different, but obviously I didn't have to go through multiple card selection, so I didn't notice it. But the reason why this is important is that there are situations where, as an example, if you got a Dawn prompt for Renewed Vigor, you should be able to look at the map because you don't want to play Renewed. I've done it so many times, even though I've got a fairly good memory in the game. The number of times I play Renewed Vigor and I suddenly realize, oh, that hunter can't get into the combat because they're too far away. Whereas maybe if I was able to see the map, I'd realize, oh, I can't actually get to that location. I won't play Renewed Vigor now. I'll wait one more turn. Same, for example,
Yeah.
if a hunter plays Lucky Find right before a combat and then it goes instantly into the combat information interface, Dracula doesn't actually know what the hunter's discarded because of Lucky Find, which could then give him a lot of information about what the hunter potentially chose as the card from Lucky Find. And that's information that should be freely available. So having this is massive. And I said, if it's going to be implemented sort of, bit by bit, brilliant. I think it's great. It's great to have tested it with the combat interface, and then we can, as I said, we can test it with other
Yeah, like
languages as well. It's great. It's absolutely
I
great.
think this is a good example of where we're giving you more information to remove the possibility that you'll end up in that feel bad situation where you're like, oh, if I'd only known that, I
Mm.
wouldn't have played that way because it's not on the player to know that information if it should be publicly accessible.
Yeah, something which has affected me quite a lot during play and testing is when I wanted to play. Well, I've got the option as Dracula to play Hidden Schemes, and I'm like, oh, is there a vampire in that third slot?
Ah,
I don't know. So I want to check now, which should be possible now.
fantastic. Good stuff. Yeah, this is amazing. Okay, you might have to tell me what this is. Added more context information when placing an encounter on a hideout. What exactly context information are we talking about?
Sure. So what this is referring to is when you one of the most common ones is when Dracula moves to a new location and is creating a new hideout. Um, it will say what is already on that hideout. Well, I suppose it's mostly useful for when you're moving to a lair,
Ah,
or using
right.
hidden schemes. So if you're using hidden schemes, I think it would say choose a choose an encounter card to place on Madrid with aristocratic vampire or something like that.
Ah, okay,
That's what you're
right.
saying.
So the information, again, is not hidden behind things. You know what you're walking into or what you're placing and things. Okay, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. It's just nice. This change was made previously before the whole being able to hide that dialogue, but it's also just nice to have it immediately on the dialogue as well instead of just saying choose encounter card. It's like, well, what am I choosing it for? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you suddenly realize you put it on the wrong space or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just to make sure that these little again, for casual games, that's not going to make a huge difference. But for more intense, players who are going to play more competitively in or outside of tournaments, just having that is just nice. Again, quality of life change. Oh yeah, okay, now okay. Again, I hadn't noticed this was the case. I didn't play Fog in my game. Added a prompt to inform players that Dracula is choosing whether or not to cancel combat using a fog token, because in the old version there was no prompt, so it looked like the game was hanging for no reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, just so then people know what Dracula is doing. It's not crashed or something.
Yeah.
Added text indicating how many cards need to be selected in multiple situations. Ah, right, I saw that. Where it's like if Godalming picks up 2 items and he has to discard two, it actually says choose 2 to discard, right?
Yeah, that's right. Instead, you having to kind of infer how many you must discard
Mm.
before the button becomes interactable. Now it tells you you need to choose one more, or you need to choose 2 more, or however many.
Hmm. Okay. And
Again, it's
again,
just that clarity, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And again, people who play the game a lot will know, right, okay, the hand size limit for items is 3, events is 3, whereas Suez has more, but again, I think, for more casual players who are learning the game, that's a really nice touch.
Yeah, it's just having more stuff immediately available in the dialogue so that you don't guess, why am I doing this? Why am I choosing this many? Why is the button not interactable right now? I've already chosen one to discard.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice quality of life.
Nice. Add a visibility token to layer dialogue so Dracula knows which layers have been discovered by hunters. But it's also on the trail as well, right? There's a little eye which appears and it
Hmm.
tells them if they've discovered it or not.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I want to just mention about this one, which
Mhm.
is we did create a graphic for this layer token, as I guess we've called it now, a
Yeah.
visibility token,
Yeah.
which was a little bit worrying about, at least from my perspective, because it's not a token. It exists in the real game. It just serves to show Dracula a bit of information, which I guess it isn't available in the physical edition. Now I think about it, is it? I suppose
No,
he
because
wouldn't
obviously
select them.
cards would just be
Would he?
naturally face up. So
Oh no, of course it would be. Oh, sorry, it would be available because he'd just look at them, I suppose,
yeah,
to see that they're face up in the physical edition. But
yeah,
in
exactly.
digital edition, if Dracula looks at his layers any time, then they will be face up no matter what, so that he can read them.
Yeah, but then you don't know. Does the hunter know that this space is available or not? Obviously, from the hunter's perspective, the layer would be face down, so you don't know where it is. But for Dracula, they would always be visible. So sometimes you have to
Yeah,
play a little bit of game like, did they discover that location? And there are ways that you can work it out, but again, you know, in the heat of the moment, it's very easy to forget. Do they know that this layer exists in this location? So yeah, it's a
yeah,
nice little touch.
yeah, and it is available on the hideouts as well. I guess a little bit of insight into why that is because they're actually the same thing, um, the layers and the hideouts in terms of at least how we display them as UI.
Yeah.
They're kind of the same. So it's just added onto there as well. They're not exactly useful in hideouts, I suppose, because you can already see when the hideouts are revealed or not, but they're also there.
But I think though it's important for then people if people come into the game and have no idea about this change, they'll see they'll have that idea of okay that location is face up on the trail and that token exists. So when it gets transferred into the layer, they'll see it move over, go, oh right, it means it was face up. So they
Yeah.
hopefully will be able to equate the two that way, rather than
Yeah.
just appearing it in the layer screen and like, what does that symbol mean?
That's a good point. When I watched other people use this, that they saw it, especially not especially, but you also did this where you hovered over it and you questioned what it was. So since then, I've added a bit of a tooltip, I suppose. When you hover over the token, it tells you that it's revealed.
Yeah, that's neat. I like that. This one I haven't tried with yet. I think I missed the update when this was done, so I want to try it out. So there's a little toggle here that you can reduce the figurine sizes of hunters, and obviously then Dracula, but Dracula doesn't appear on the board very often, to improve the
Yeah.
visibility of the map around them. How was that as a challenge?
It wasn't to implement itself. It was not as difficult as you might expect. What it really does is it reduces the size of all the models of the characters, Dracula included, to be the same size as they are when there are multiple on one location. If you
Mm.
notice when they shrink down, when there's more than one character on one location,
They shrink.
I believe it's about half size. But with this enabled, they are always that size, no matter what, no matter how many people or tokens are on the location with you. They'll still be in the center of the city, like they are when they're on their own.
Right, they don't
On their
get
own.
pushed to one side then.
They only get pushed to one side if there's a token. like
Already
fog
there.
token or
Or another hunter.
another hunter. Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet. That's gonna be nice to look at because I think because just because the like the figurines like the busts are quite big, sometimes it's hard to see past them. There are roads that suddenly get hit, especially in like the center of the map where a lot of the cities are very congested. It's very
Yeah.
easy to suddenly forget, oh, there's a road that connects those two cities together. Obviously, when you play on the tabletop version, you can see it top down, whereas on the digital edition, the map moves kind of away from you. The southern part of the map is slightly closer than the northern part, so things
Yeah,
are moving away from you. So yeah, but again, it gives the option. You can toggle it for certain moments, or if you prefer it toggled small all the time, then toggle it small all the time. It'd be, yeah, I'm going to try it out in the next game I play and see what it looks like.
pretty cool.
This one again, I'm really happy about this one. I'm happy about everything, obviously, but this one too, like the Dracula vampire location name is available now in the combat info dialogue. Because again, in the heat of the moment, and you've seen it where there are games where there are vampires all over the trail, it's very easy to suddenly forget, wait, where am I? What
Yeah.
vampire is
Yeah.
this? Is this the hide card or is this the normal one? And where is Yeah, it's.
It's just
Yeah,
more information for the player, isn't it? Like it's
yeah,
just making it so that you don't have to do bookkeeping that's unnecessary.
yeah. And it's not, and
Yeah.
it's very subtle too. It's just there underneath the little icon in the combat information screen. It's just the name is written there. It's not
Yeah.
intrusive. It's nicely placed there. You didn't. I don't think you didn't have to rearrange anything in the combat information screen to make that work.
No, basically attached it to the vampire, I suppose UI piece just
Mhm.
underneath of it. Yeah, nothing really need to be rearranged. It's quite simple. Um, it does take into account hide be clear. Yeah, so if
Mm.
the vampire is under the hide power card, then it will also say which location it's attached to in the combat info dialogue. So let's I'll just use Madrid as an example again. If hide is placed on Madrid and you're fighting a new vampire in the hide on Madrid, then it'll say hide in brackets Madrid.
Oh, that's amazing.
Uh,
That's really cool. I haven't seen that yet, but that's really cool. I saw it with when it said just hide. I didn't see it with the hide and Madrid. That's really neat because again, that's another problem that we have. Once you get initially, if a hunter gets initially ambushed with a vampire, say you've got a city location which has a vampire and the hide has a vampire, when the initial ambush happens, you can see quickly before the combat information screen appears, and now you can toggle it which vampires ambushed you. But once those two vampires have become visible, anybody who then gets ambushed again or searches it, they don't actually know which vampire it is unless they're two different types. Imagine you got two reckless vampires. You can't
yeah,
tell the difference between them. And there's so many times I've seen it where people have like, I know this is not in combat, but they've staked the wrong vampire, or they've used heavenly hose on a reckless vampire, and they're cheering that they killed the vampire, but then that was the hide one. Yeah, and you don't. And that's the last thing you want to happen
yeah,
in any situation, but especially in tournament games when emotions are running high and stuff. So yeah, again, it's just a nice little quality of life change that's there. And again, this one I haven't tested either because I'm not very good at making layers. I'm sure Wizardkajic will be testing this out. Be just added a move confirmation for Dracula when moving to a layer. And this is something where players should be checking the layer box, and it's a weakness of mine that a lot of times I don't check the layer box often enough. But if Dracula moves into a layer that was revealed on the trail before it got turned into a layer, hunters know instantly where he is, and they can just kill him, and that can be a game-ending mistake. And again, you want to avoid that. There are times where Dracula wants to go into a lair where they've revealed, and that's absolutely fine. If that's what Dracula wants to do, great. But I know it. I've won tournament games where the player has gone into a lair and they've actually not realized they went into a lair. I've had it before talking to tournament players afterwards where they're like, "How do you know I was in that location? You had like 10 locations to check. Did you get lucky?" I was like, "No, you revealed yourself. You went into a lair." So just avoiding that is great, and it's a very simple dialogue prompt. It's not going to take much time. It's just a case of like, "Are you sure?" Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
It combos with I guess it kind of conflicted a little bit with the existing move to location confirmation option, which is in the settings. We didn't want players to have to click two separate ones, so we
mm,
combined them. In the case where if you have the option disabled, where you don't want to click confirm on everything, the option sorry this move to layer confirmation will still appear. Um,
that's neat.
but if you do have the option enabled, you don't have to click the same confirmation twice, it'll combine them.
Oh, that's really neat. That's very clever. Because, yeah, again, there are people who do have these settings so because they don't want to be going through all these prompts, even though I'd always recommend it because I've seen so many mistakes happen with people not be able to confirm actions before they do them. But yeah, the fact that it is over accidentally gets turned off or whatever, then yeah, it's like built in. It'll always trigger. That's nice. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Changes.
Yes.
Top one is massive. Most of the changes help buff Dracula. This is the one that buffs hunters. This is massive. So the way the combat information screen used to work was it would count the number of combat cards that a hunter had, and that was basically the three basic ones: dodge, escape, and punch, plus any other item cards they had which are actively able to be played in combat. So we're talking about knife, rifle, pistol, crucifix, garlic. I think that's all of them. I've probably forgotten one.
Yeah.
But then passive one, so garlic wreath doesn't count. If they've obviously got a stake or a horse, then that would get discounted. Holy bullets wouldn't count either. So I liked that because as Dracula, you could actually gain quite a lot of information. You could start ambushing with vampires to then ascertain if a hunter has a stake or maybe holy bullets or how many items they have. But obviously, in the original board game, that's not how it's done. When you go into combat, the hunter takes all of their items and put them into their hand, even if they can't be played in combat, so they can sort of obscure what they've got.
Yeah. This was, if I'm being a little bit honest, I don't really recall why this was implemented a while ago. And by this, I mean the original displaying combat hand size, because that really, when you think about it, is just hidden information, which was just being displayed.
Yeah.
But now it's been replaced with just how many item cards the hunter has in general, which it was replaced partly because I suppose it's nice to have it immediately there, even if the hunters generally always have their maximum hand size of item cards. So most of the time it will say 3 or 4 for Seward.
Yep.
But to just replace it and not have the empty space, or I suppose make everything smaller for that UI piece for the hunters, was just a little bit more convenient. And I suppose it doesn't hurt to have the information there.
No, because I mean, I know it's combined with the toggle map buttons. It means then you can suddenly look and go, oh yeah, Mina has 2 items, not 3. But still, the fact that it's there, I think is really neat.
I think when we were originally designing the Fury of Dracula, because it has so much hidden information in the game, and we were working really hard to like keep track of what should be shared at different times and what shouldn't be shared ever. We had like a big list of, okay, this is how we're going to implement all of this, and I think this must have just got lost in the shuffle as another thing that needs to be hidden.
No, that's fair. There's so much stuff in this game, so I'm not.
Oh yeah,
that's right. I'm very intrigued by this change to see how it changes the meta for a couple of things. For firstly, how will hunters view combat? So, as a player, for me, I always try to get into multi-hunter combats, especially 3v1s or 4v1s against Dracula, because especially if Dracula's deduced a lot of information about what your hunters have for items, well, it doesn't matter if you've got 4 hunters in the combat. Dracula can't counter all of you. So it's very easy then to win the combat. Whereas this way, if all of your items are hidden, Dracula's not going to be able to deduce as well what hunters have. So I don't know if this will happen. I'm very intrigued to see how it works. It also depends on individual player style. There might be a shift towards only more 1v1s and more 2v1 combats, because hunters can hide more easily what they've got in terms of items. Then Dracula's having to make a lot more deduction and maybe think about the player, like what items do they prefer, all this sort of thing. The other thing too then would be, if that is the case, if the combat shifts more towards 1v1s and 2v1s rather than 3v1s and up, then other cards like Lucy's Revenge, Planned Ambush, Sister Agatha, they then suddenly become more important because hunters will need them more to make those smaller, combats with Dracula work. And then if Dracula's having to deduce this information, he can't deduce combat hand by vampire ambushes anymore. So then Dracula's going to have to make use of other encounter cards like wolves, even something like rats, which is considered, these two are considered quite weak encounters in the current meta, they're going to be amplified, because then gaining that knowledge from the rats or the wolves that they've got a rifle or a pistol or whatever is way more valuable than it would be before, because you can maybe deduce it from ambushing with vampires instead. And vampires are generally more valuable because they give you influence points, they can advance the influence track and so on, and potentially even then kill hunters if you get them in a really awkward combat situation. I'm really interested to see. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong and nothing will change. I think the items which are strong will always be strong, but it's going to be interesting to see how then the two sides view this information and how they then try to hide information from each other and how they can deduce things from one another. I think it's going to be very intriguing to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see if more Draculas will run away when they don't need to or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you see, they're going to start escaping as battle or whatever, but maybe they don't have. Or you mean in terms of combat or in terms of on the trail?
Yeah, in combat, maybe Dracula enters combat with a hunter, and he's got all his item cards, and maybe there's 2 hunters in the combat, and they've got 3 item cards, but maybe they all have stakes and dogs and nothing. But I better leave or something.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
funny.
exactly. This game is bad, and then the hunters are like, yeah, nothing to fear. Or even just on the trail, like Dracula might move to sea, fearing all of these hunters because they have no idea what the item cards are. But maybe as you said, the hunters are holding things like dogs and stakes, which are no use in combat. So yeah, it's going to be intriguing to see. And again, I think this is where individual player personalities are going to start playing a role as well. So yeah,
How much people are willing to take a risk.
yeah, exactly. So we'll see. Again, we need to get more games. I'm speaking personally for myself. I've played some games with the beta, but not many. So I'm gonna have to play quite a few, sort of get a feel of it in terms of like when I can take risks and when I have to then play more conservative. It's gonna be very intriguing to see how it all pans out. But then again, this one, as I said, it's bringing it closer to what the physical version of the game is. It's buffing hunters, but that's not the intention. It's just let's make it like the physical game. And if it buffs hunters, then it buffs hunters. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
So that's the big one. I think of all the changes, that's like the really, really big one.
Yeah.
Dracula can now face discarded face down encounter cards. There's just some situations where, like from behind the veil and all this sort of thing, where some cards, or maybe if he was discarding them from desecrated soil, they wouldn't be visible, and it just became a little bit weird sometimes. You had to try to, again, it's something, maybe it's not the hardest thing to remember, but it's an extra thing you have to remember. And that's then brain energy that's not being used towards actually playing the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that unnecessary bookkeeping, isn't it? Again.
Yeah.
Next one, this was like a weird inconsistency. When Dracula moves to Castle Dracula, he should get 5 health. We discovered that the game, if you move into Castle Dracula normally, the game ends in terms of gaining influence if it's in the 4th week, and then Dracula heals, but because you see the end of game screen, you don't actually see the healing. But if you wolf form into Castle Dracula, you gain the health, and then the game ends.
Yeah.
So it's really inconsistent. And again, is that a big deal for casual games? No, it's not. But obviously for tournament play, where the way we do our scoring system is based upon the amount of influence that Dracula has and the amount of health that Dracula has at the end of the game, that's really important. If he's missing 5 health, that could be the difference between a player qualifying for something or not. So it's just an inconsistency.
Yeah, it's interesting.
This one, this is really important too. If you're reviewing cards revealed by Spy or Consecrated Grounds, I guess that means like the Heavenly Host tokens is no longer on a timer. The Spy one in particular, because if someone got ambushed or searched as Spy, you could suddenly have a screen with up to 8 event and item cards total shown at you.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of information to take on board very quick. I know there's print screen and all this stuff. I know you can ask in the chat, what things do you have? You can confirm it. But now it just means you don't have to worry about that stuff. It's not on a timer. You can just calmly look at it. And then when you've got everything recorded and everything memorized, then you go, okay.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of something that, because of tournament play and because we've seen the level of play that's been happening in Fury of Dracula, we don't want people to have to go, oh, I need to rely on chat or ask this extra thing. Like, we want them to be able to look at this information clearly and make informed decisions.
Yeah. Agreed. Again, there's something that you alluded to earlier, Eredra, the fact that now in online combat, the hunters and Dracula pick simultaneously, whereas before it used to be hunters and then Dracula. my understanding was that this was something that was spoken about. I'm sure it was on a live stream, maybe up to 2 years ago now, where this was mentioned, but it was going to have to involve a lot of awkward recoding. Did that actually end up being the case, or was it actually quite a simple solution?
A little bit of both. To get into the coding stuff, um, the solution itself is somewhat complicated or kind of nuanced, um, but it didn't take long because it was something that I've already done. When I say I've already done, my previous uh, project before working on the Immortal update was Catan, and in Catan there's a lot of trading going on, a lot of trading between players and all resources going across everywhere. So we didn't want to just have players responding to a trade request one after another because it could be up to 6 players
Mm.
with certain expansions. So we figured out a way in the kind of way that we design turn-based games to allow players to pick what their response is to a certain situation, and then it kind of holds on to them and waits for everything to be in the correct order, and then sends them off to everyone else. It's not explained very well, sorry, but to summarize, everyone, all the hunters and Dracula still actually send their information at the same time as before the simultaneous stuff. It's just now they can pick it before they get sent off.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but so yeah, to fully answer, it was a little complicated, but it was fast because we've figured it out before.
Nice. So
Just
drawing on that previous experience, then that's great.
to make it more convenient.
From a from a playing perspective, one aspect of the game that apart from individual player speed in general terms of making decisions is combat. If you've got a game that's very combat heavy, there are some games which are not. You can have very, very quick combat. All the vampires get staged. You just kill Dracula in one combat. But there are other games which are they can be, and I mean this in a positive way, like a slog in terms of like there's lots of combat, which is obviously very exciting to watch, but it can really slow down the game a lot. So now they've got this simultaneous sort of, picking of the cards. It does speed things up, which is then again not the biggest change in terms of like the change wasn't necessary. It doesn't break the game, but it just has that little again quality of life. And also then too because then one aspect where maybe it does in terms of tournament play. If I'm Dracula and I see the hunter player really mulling over their choice of combat card, that might influence what I pick. Whereas now, as Dracula, I'm gonna have to pick my combat card without even seeing, what the hunter. I don't even know how long the hunter is taking for their turn.
Hmm.
Which then, again, it might reveal information that you don't want to reveal, if that makes sense.
That is quite interesting, because we were considering after implementing the simultaneous choices in combat for this update, we were considering actually trying to implement something where uh, when a hunter or when any character finished choosing their card on their end, it would update for everyone else and show them that they have picked. The reason we did this was because we considered this. We haven't actually done that. The reason we considered doing this is because we kind of thought in the physical edition, at least the way we played it when we tested the game a while ago, was whenever we finished choosing the combat card we were going to do, we'd always take it from our hand and place it face down on the table.
Yeah.
Which, in hindsight, I suppose really is just giving away information for no reason.
Mhm.
Not a very good poker face if we say, right, we've chosen now. And the other side says, oh, that instance is my choice.
So there's bluffing
Yeah,
going on though. You could pretend
that's
to be
true.
mulling over the easiest choice in the world.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I suppose so now in hindsight, it's probably better that it's done more secretly.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that, while we can implement it for our own reasons as developers, I think having this feedback from the community of how it actually impacts play between the players is really important for us understanding, like, oh, this is why this change actually enhances the game or changes the way that people play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agreed. The next two kind of combined with each other. There are certain dialogue prompts and things in the game where you didn't know potentially which hunter was being targeted by an ambush or which hunter was discarding things. So just now, again, it's just that little bit of extra information where if there's a hunter that's being targeted by something or doesn't reveal a card, because of,
Yeah.
a spy ambush or no, a spy ambush or a mob ambush or something, you know it. The one that was really annoying was a Great Wolf, where you can just because it happened every turn for Dracula. If he allied the Great Wolf, he would just pick a hunter every turn, and a lot of the times hunters would be like, which hunter's been targeted here? Because maybe you don't want to reveal the information, or maybe you do, depending on the health or whatever. And there's always like really trying to rush to type in the text box or the chat in the game. I'm targeting Mina, I'm targeting Van Helsing or whatever, which is fine if the two players are aware of it. But if you've suddenly got somebody who's maybe doesn't want to use the chat box or doesn't speak English or whatever, then that information's lost. So this way it just makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, very simple. Just adding the name to the text and the title. Everyone's aware of it.
Nice. We don't really use Dracula markers in terms of 1v1 matches, but the fact that they can be removed once you place them, you can then just click them and get rid of them.
Nice, simple change.
Yeah. Selecting coastal cities during excellent weather improved. Because this is an interesting one. There are certain parts of the board where I'm thinking of places like Le Havre as a classic example, where it's quite easy to misclick it and you just get sent into the English channel. And then again, if you don't have the confirm move prompt on, you just go into the English channel and you're stuck there and you've used your excellent weather. Why is that the case? Why are there certain locations on the board which are very harder? I'm not saying they're very hard, I don't exaggerate, but they were harder to click than others.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one. So this is actually down a little bit combined with the way the camera is angled and also the mesh bound, the mesh model of the locations and map combined in such a way that in some places, if you try to click on Le Havre, for example, or any really, how do I explain it? Any city which is kind of on the northern coast, so like Santander or Le Havre, right? But not Alicante.
Yep.
That's how I'm kind of describe. Any of those cities, when you try to click them, you might click the model for the C zone instead, because it's kind of overlapping a little bit. So the fix for this was to just how to get into my modeling software of choice and manually change the mesh for most of the seasons. Yeah,
okay.
just so they don't overlap. Basically, I've tried to reduce as much overlapping as possible. I won't claim that I've done the best. I've done the best job I can, but I won't say it's perfect. There may still be situations where you say I definitely clicked this location like Swansea or something,
yep.
and it took me to the Irish Sea, but I think it's been improved as far as I know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like once we play loads of games, we'll notice, to what extent it's been improved, and obviously then we can give feedback if that's the case.
Yeah,
that's
always appreciated.
Is it something to do with the fact are small cities more susceptible to this compared to the large, the large cities?
I suppose in a way, yes, because they have less area than large cities in general. It's got nothing to do with they're pretty much identical in terms of where their clickable area is, apart from I guess they're rotated and slightly larger for large cities. But because small cities are smaller, it means that there is a higher chance for them to be kind of over the edge of the land and overlapping with the sea for more of their like total area, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So maybe if the sea was just slightly over the edge of the land, if it was a large city, then there'd be more of the city to click below the coast. So it might have been easier for large cities. But yes, I think I agree that smaller cities were more impacted by this.
Okay. The next one, yeah, again, massive for new players. The classic mature or lair trap. I've seen so many vampires getting layered instead of gaining all that wonderful influence from them. So yeah, if people don't know, I mean, I don't think, I guess it doesn't matter. I suppose if they don't know it, they don't have to worry about it anymore. But the whole idea was in the original version that if a location slid off the trail, the prompt would say something on the lines of, "Do you want to promote this city location with this encounter to a layer?" Which is an interesting choice of phrase because maturing is normally the thing you want to do rather than layering. Mature is normally the default thing you want to do. because layering is kind of like an advanced rule,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
mature. So the default is normally to mature things, and also it's the fact they're using like, again, I don't know how non-native speakers of English would view this, but promote indicates something like positive. So if you're non-native and you've read that, you might go, "Oh yeah, promote. That sounds promising." And then it doesn't do the
Yeah.
thing that you expect it to do.
I believe this was implemented, or the wording was chosen, I think, purely from some kind of isolated view where maturing wasn't considered. It was considered as, okay, so this is a hideout, and now we have the option to change it into a lair. That's a promotion. It's a
Yeah.
Right.
it's a better version of a lair, probably because it's a better version of a hideout because it can have more, or you're about to add more encounter cards, but I guess hideouts can also have more encounter cards. But yes, I agree. The fact that it was a yes/no dialogue as well definitely compounded with the confusion about what you're actually about to do. And saying no is also like not very indicative of, okay, so you're not going to promote, now you're going to mature by pressing no. It is a little odd for sure. Yeah, there was a bit of a debacle about highlighting buttons on this one, which, just to explain a little bit, was because I think it might have been something left over from the console ports where we select a button to kind of be the default of what they're selecting. So obviously with controller, there's no cursor or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So when you navigate the options on the dialogue, one needs to be visibly different. So this is the one that will activate when I press
Right.
A or X or something.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's been disabled for PC.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense now because when that first update came out, the mature was like really boldly like with like this nice highlight around it, which
Yeah.
again I thought was kind of nice because it's kind of pointing to the player like that's the one that you'll probably want to do. But then if I realize now if it comes from the console port, that makes a lot of sense. Did I when we were giving feedback, was this like the easiest solution? You didn't have to recode anything; it was just a case of changing text, right?
Um. Actually, no. I don't believe much code was added for this in an interesting way, but not because anything changed, really because we created a new dialogue for this. As in,
Also, so it's not a
kind
case
of,
of just literally changing the content of a text box. I'm not a developer.
yeah.
Or code. I've got no idea.
Well, I suppose I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in this case. Effectively, it is the same from any player's perspective. It makes no difference. But the way we implemented it was we created a new like dialogue object called the layer or mature dialogue, I think, where and we added like a new behavior for it and whatnot. But that none of this really matters. I'm kind of waffling about that. It effectively is just changing the text. To be fair.
Okay, nice. So you didn't have to start recoding in terms of what option did what. It was like
No.
the one which was no to promoting to a layer is the mature button.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
yeah, and that's fine for me. If you got layer on one side and mature on the other, I don't think for me as a player it doesn't matter which way round they are, as long as I can see the options clearly. You'd see it like even me, like I've played so many games. When I'm playing tournament games, I literally had to read that prompt like, a little kid in primary school learning to read to make sure, am I doing the thing I really, really want to do?
Yeah.
Whereas now I don't have to stress about that in the same way, which again is taking energy away from that and you can dedicate it to other things. The next couple to do with the chat box, which is nice that now that it's available, that there are some prompts that could hide it, so you can then access the chat more easily if you need to ask the other player something, which is nice. And also there was a bug where if you were typing and then there's like some sort of transition in the game, all the text would get highlighted, and then you press one key press, and then the whole thing would disappear. The number of times I've had to rewrite messages 5 times.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So that's now gone, which is good. When selecting event or discarding cards, the multiple select dialog will appear no matter how many cards. Okay, so this is just a consistency thing that when it was just one card, if you had like just say renewed vigor,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a different selection sort of dialogue interface compared to if you had a speed telegraph and speed telegraph and renewed vigor, and you could pick the one that you wanted, and you had to move them across from the left to the right.
Yeah.
So again, for newer players, it'll just make it a bit easier. They'll know it's the same screen every time. And also then too, the number of times I saw people playing cards like Speedy Telegraph or Renewed Vigor in very strange ways, and I kind of wondered, maybe they misclicked and they selected it by mistake. But obviously, I wasn't able to ask them.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
think another symptom of that, or a reason why that was probably happening, is maybe because of how the two dialogues differ in terms of when you can proceed with what you want to do. So
Mm,
with the latter, the multiple selecting one, where you've got the cards on the left and you move them to the right, um, by default, if you press the button at the bottom, which previously only said submit, nothing would happen. You'd if you were allowed to just choose nothing, then nothing would happen. Whereas with the one where you could only choose one, if you press submit at the bottom, it would choose the one that was currently in the middle of the screen.
yep.
Yeah, so
And that
it
was
was
the
a big
problem.
increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I think
been
a
updated.
lot of cases where Speed Telegraph got played and the player just played it as normal, and I was like, I think you've misused Speedy Telegraph. I think you've just clicked that by mistake because you're just doing it quickly without thinking. Yeah, and not reading. And again, for non-native English speakers, it might be easy to mix up potentially the names of things. So yeah. Oh yeah. So now Kadif is more visible, which is nice. It was kind of hidden there, depending on the
Yeah,
resolution. I saw one player in the tournament who had a view of the game, a resolution I've never seen before, and there was so much like almost like table surrounding the board. I was like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
But now in
uh,
the more like classic sort of resolution that most people use, Kadif is now just slightly, it's just slightly further inward, so then it's not hidden. And also then that connection between the Mediterranean and the South Atlantic too. Um, was also hidden
yeah,
because a lot of times people, especially again, no disrespect, but Americans who don't know European geography would be like, "Wait, which sea does Cadiz go into?" And then yeah, they just then cause no end of problems in terms of knowing where Dracula is. So again, nice.
it's good.
I don't know what this one means.
Yeah, it's quite generic.
Yeah, this
Um,
Casar menu select list is now properly localized.
yeah, so I believe there should be more specifically written, to be fair. But what this was really referring to is rail ticket token names. Before, I believe it was, I think whenever you chose to discard a ticket using the multiple selection dialog, um, when you selected a ticket on the left and it moved to the right, the right side would display something like ticket underscore 3_2 or something.
Okay.
Now I've just made it a bit nicer to read, so it's ticket
Oh,
slash 3/2 or something similar. So it just appears more like the card, I believe.
okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little bit more human readable. No
Mhm.
underscores.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's fair. Oh yeah, this one. Every player's had this problem at some point. So when you activate plotting in combat, it then shows you all the cards that you can take something from, and the number of times I'm trying to work out this is the card I'm playing in the next round of combat, and so I'm like, no, it's the one. I'm I'm plotting.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
taking the
plotting.
card into my hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, there's a nice little quality of life. It says you're taking this card, you're not playing it. Again, nice. Uh, next one, a single player can no longer play multiple planned ambushes at once. Obviously, this is not a bug that was very frequent because hunters don't normally run around with double planned ambush, but clearly there was something that could happen with that. I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
exactly what happened if they did. Did it end up playing that with both round one and round two that they would be able to change cards?
No, I don't believe so. All it would really do is just waste a planned ambush. It wouldn't
Ah,
change anything in
uh,
combat, as far as I
okay. Oh,
know.
well, okay. There's a waste of a card was a bit of a shame.
Yeah. I think it just led to another one of those feel bad situations where players would be like, oh, that didn't work. Given that I was given the option to do it, I expected it to do something, but
Yeah.
it then just wasted the card.
Yeah, if I wanted to be snooty and say, well, technically you should be able to do this, but there really is no reason anyone would ever want to do this, so we don't want anyone to accidentally do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Hunters can discard rail tickets after collecting new tickets. This is a rule that I didn't know. This is one that I can't remember who it was who brought it up, or maybe I was reading the rules reference to find something out, and then I discovered the rule. I can't remember where this rule came from. It was one that for a long time I didn't know that was the case. Because when you see people playing it in real life, they don't do it in the digital edition. It wasn't done. Um,
Yeah,
but obviously, as a hunter player, I really like this just because it gives me more flexibility in terms of tickets. So the reason why this is important is if you pick up a ticket and you don't like the ticket, you can just instantly throw it back into the pool. This is more important because the meta of the way that we play is with an item called Fast Horses, which is basically when you activate Fast Horses, you draw a ticket from the common pool, not the ticket you're holding on to, but from the pool of tickets which are left, and whatever yellow number is on it, you move those number of spaces. So what you're kind of trying to do as hunters for the whole game is you're trying to manipulate this ticket pool so that you move 2 spaces every turn. The thing that you try to do then is spend an action at night by drawing a ticket to try to reduce the number of non-yellow 2 tickets in that pool. But the thing is, if you pick up you take that action at night and you've got a yellow 2, you're now stuck with that yellow 2 ticket which you don't want, and it means you've made the economy of the tickets worse. You made it more likely that the next turn you're not going to roll those yellow 2. Whereas this time, now with this change, I can freely, try to find those last, tickets that I want to take out of the ticket pool. And if I pick up a yellow 2 and I don't need the yellow 2, I'll just throw it back in immediately. And I haven't made my horse economy worse. So it means, again, this is not a change that's going to affect a lot of players, but at the very, very, very high level of hunter play, being able to manipulate your ticket pool more effectively is going to potentially could be the difference between catching Dracula or not.
Yeah, it really is just a rule which I think was just overlooked. Perhaps I believe it's only in the rules reference, I think, where this is even a possibility which we allow players to do. It's a possibility we might have been missed a while ago when implementing reserving tickets for the game's release.
Yeah, I think this is another good example of something that if you're just looking through the rule in isolation and you're like, oh, the impact of whether or not people can discard their rail tickets after collecting new tickets, that doesn't seem in isolation to be a rule that would actually impact the game all that much. But now that we've obviously seen players play the game so much and all of the tournaments and everything, we can see, oh, actually, that does have an impact, even if it doesn't sound like it would.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very impressed, honestly, with the level of hunter play and thought which has gone into playing the game in general, at least with the digital. I'm unaware of any maybe real life, like I guess communities of Fury of Dracula which maybe have figured this out. But I guess the meta which has evolved around the ticket pool with fast horses is kind of mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Never considered it.
No, I was just saying I think the thing is when you play within your own little board game groups, like with the physical edition, your meta very much develops around your group, and you might not, unless you're really, really keen on the game and you go onto Board Game Geek and try and find videos on YouTube or whatever, it's very much kind of like you're in that little community. Whereas now, the fact there is, with the digital edition, it's so much easier to be able to record games and showcase them, and to go on to places like Board Game Geek or on YouTube or whatever and to say, look, here's how you can get more movement as hunters, here's how you use this item or whatever. And then it means there's more availability for physical, version players to suddenly be like, oh, right, okay, we can do it this way and discover new things about the game. And then the whole thing will just continue to develop more and more and more. It's really funny when you see a lot of people talk about fast horses in this way, that they think it's very overpowered. And when you say it in isolation, like, yeah, 3 hunters can move potentially 2 spaces every turn. When you say it like that in isolation, it seems very overpowered. But you need to then consider, what are you giving up for that? That's 1 item slot that you're having to use permanently for a movement. So that means that there's no space for the stake, or for the heavenly host, or for the knife, or the rifle, garlic, or whatever item you want. That's not there anymore. So the individual hunter strength in terms of dealing with encounters and combat is weaker. So that means when you got to try and gang up on Dracula more in sort of multi-hunter combats. And then you've got to spend all of that time trying to get the fast horses and then setting up the ticket so then the horses don't die by drawing the white 1, ticket with no yellow number on it. That can take time. The number of times I've had games where I get all the fast horses, but I can't get the bad tickets out. So the horses aren't really that efficient. Or you set up the perfect ticket economy and all the fast horses are stuck at the bottom of the deck. And then you're starting to have to make decisions of, do I just keep supplying to get these horses, or do I start trying to move and deal with this trail, which I have to deal with? I'm giving up hoaxes and bodyguards and lots of influence points. It creates then decisions about what it is you're trying to do. And then again, there are some parts of the map where rail travel is just quicker. So then you might want to prioritize that. So yeah, it's very interesting when you see people coming along and trying to criticize this and say, oh, it's very overpowered, because there are downsides to it.
For sure.
The next one, I assume, is just related to the previous stuff we talked about, prompts and things. So instead of saying the word submit, maybe I haven't paid attention fully to it, but there's some word changes to make things a bit clearer.
Yeah, when you're discarding cards, it'll say discard. If you're ambushing someone with an encounter, it'll say ambush and things like that, instead of always saying submit.
Nice. Next one. Okay, right. Along with the mature and lair prompt, this is another one that catches out new players at least once. Everyone's done this at least once, unintentionally. I have done it intentionally sometimes, and it works out to my benefit. But so in the old version, if Dracula tries to use wolf form and hide was available, it would instantly come up with a prompt and say, "Do you want to combine wolf form with hide?" Which would mean that basically wolf form is consumed, but Dracula stays on the same location. Which many times Dracula does not want to do. If he's using wolf form, it's because he wants to move up to 2 spaces, but it's even worse if that city is already revealed, because then you stay placed and you're still visible. So now it's changed. Again, I haven't tried it since, but I'll try it out and see what it looks like. This is saying now the hide prompt doesn't appear, but you can select your current city if you so wish.
Yeah, it's just removing another dialogue, which is always nicer visually for the player experience. And yeah, instead of a prompt which says, "Do you want to play combine these cards?" which sounds quite positive, but it's really kind of a niche play, which you can do, which is in the rules you're allowed to do, but you might not want to do it. But now, if you know, okay, I want to play wolf form, but then when you consider, do I want to play wolf form with hide? Well, you can just click your current location, or maybe if you didn't even know that you could do that, you could say, "Oh, I'm going to play wolf form." And then you click your current location because you saw it was highlighted. Oh, that's strange. Why is my current location highlighted? You can't move to your same location. And then if you do that, then a prompt comes up saying, "Do you want to play wolf form with hide? Yes or no?" And then you can say, "All right, yes or no."
Oh, so there is then a secondary prompt just to ask, like, are you sure you want to do that?
Just to confirm, we added it as a kind of precaution because we imagined people might just say, "Oh, I'll just move there," but they didn't realize it would consume hide. They'd think they're just playing wolf form.
Right.
But it's not. It doesn't show the card, and it's not a confusing dialogue with an X in the top right. It's a yes or no.
Perfect. That's awesome. That's great. So yeah, the new players out there will rejoice, because I've seen so many games end with that, and it happens once. No. Again, if it's in a tournament, you feel really bad about it as well. Again, this one, another one, is a little bit of a rule that I didn't realize was a thing, but again, you're giving Dracula more options. So when Dracula is going to mature a hideout, again, this is not a common situation because you don't normally have more than one encounter on a hideout when it matures. Yeah, there are situations you can, if it was a lair previously, or because of hidden schemes and all this sort of stuff. But now you can choose which ones you want to mature, which ones are discarded. And then also I guess the order that they mature, because then if you mature a vampire first, everything else gets discarded anyway. So that's really neat.
So yeah, this also applies to when the hideout only has one encounter, which you could choose to not mature if you want. I believe this is useful. Maybe if wolves is in a hideout which is extremely isolated and there's no hunters around, and all it does is reveal.
Okay. So you're not forced to lair it. You can mature it, but you don't actually then mature it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. That's neat. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, niche situation, but it's part of the rules, so it should be it.
Yeah.
Again, I think for many players, this is not going to affect much. But again, at the really, really high level, and again, in very niche situations, yeah, this could be potentially game-winning or game-ending, depending on how things are done. So again, just giving Dracula more options, which I think is always going to be a benefit. Yeah. Okay, so there's the next one coming up, and there's one at the bottom we can maybe talk about together because they're related. So they're saying now, if Mina has a positive psychic scan result, it stands out more when Dracula's in that region, which I think is great because I've misread it before and I've almost lost tournaments because of it. But then at the bottom it's saying here, updated physical bond dialogue options to be more clear to the player. Is this the same thing or is it something different?
No, so the former is now, instead of when Mina Harker is together with another hunter, instead of whispering, "Oh, Dracula's with us," by the way, she now yells, "Dracula's near us!" and everything. It's all it's all highlighted or in bold.
Yeah.
That's the former change. The latter change at the bottom of the change list where it says updated psychic bond dialogue options to be more clear to the player. This is before you use psychic bond, when you select the special action as Mina Harker. If you have cards which you can play at that time and you can play psychic bond, it is now more similar to the mature or lair flow, which we talked about earlier, where instead of saying yes or no to playing psychic bond, and then you select no, and then you can select cards, it asks you, do you want to use psychic bond or play a card? And then the buttons say psychic bond, and the other one says card.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, very good. Because again, in the heat of the moment, it's very easy to suddenly pick the wrong one. I've done it before. Again, it was while I was learning, but because now again, I talk like a little kid when I'm playing the tournament games. I'm like, do I want a psychic scan? No. And I'm very deliberate about it, saying it out loud. But again, I've done it where I want to use fast horses, but I see psychic bond, I just instantly click yes without thinking. And I'm just like, oh, I've now lost this action, which I want to do something else with. So that's really neat. That's really nice because we were talking about that offline about how you could potentially have that. Would you have like psychic bond as almost like as a pseudo card that would appear with all the others like hypnosis and fast horses? But that's a nice sort of workaround, which then you don't need to worry about creating a new sort of pseudo card and all this sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
would have
nice
taken more
little
time
workaround.
to do that, unfortunately. It would have been much nicer, we agree. It was something we thought about a while, but unfortunately, decided to go with the simpler, faster option for this
No,
case, I'm afraid.
I think that's nice. I like it. Again, it's kind of moving in the right direction, right? Even if it's not fully where we wanted to go with it, you're still progressing in the way that you know the community is saying. So
Yeah,
I
it's
think
better than before,
that's
for sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so what are they saying here? A hunter affected by bats on Cagliari now simply becomes delayed. Okay, so we're talking about this. So the original is, I don't know if you call it a bug or rule implementation error. This is one that you and I did kind of go back and forth about quite a bit. So the original version was if you got hit with bats on Cagliari, the bats token would remain because there's no location to push the hunter to. The hunter can then leave Cagliari, is not delayed, but then the moment that they land in another port, then the bats would trigger, and then they get pushed somewhere else, and then they get delayed and all this sort of stuff, which is okay. It's a bit weird, but it's okay. But then something which was brought up, which I thought was a very interesting way. I can't remember who it was, and I'm sorry, whoever's listening to this, they'll know it is there. But somebody said I don't like that implementation because it means that the hunter has control of where they get pushed with bats, more or less, rather than it's Dracula who's in control. Whereas
Yeah.
this way now is just the hunter is instantly they lose their turn and then they get delayed and all that stuff. So
Yeah, for sure. I want to say um, how much of an authority I'm on the matter. Bats is one of the more troublesome encounter cards for us
yeah, okay.
with how it should be done.
Yeah,
The rules were very. I don't want to just keep pushing blame onto the rules, but it was quite difficult for us to interpret the correct way for bats to be implemented when you cannot move.
yeah,
So there's a difference. We came to the conclusion, we agreed with the suggestion to make this how Cagliari functions with bats for a couple of reasons, but the primary one is that when we compare it to the fog, there is an explicit fog rule when you're affected by bats, and you're in a city affected by fog, um, which is separate. We kind of believe that there are roads connecting to the city with fog, presumably, but you're just not allowed to move to them. But with Cagliari, there are no roads, so we believe there's a meaningful difference between, like, you could move by road, but you're just not allowed to, and you cannot move by road because there are no roads.
yeah.
So we kind of came to the conclusion that bats attempts to move you, and now it can't. So it just doesn't move you, and then you become delayed as normal. Compared with the fog rule, though, where you're not, where it explicitly says in the rules, I believe you need to wait. I think for the
Yeah,
fog.
until the fog dissipates and then you get pushed and all this sort of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, which is
yeah.
quite nasty if I think about it. But
That is very
yeah,
nasty. But again, it's a combination you don't see very often. Which is really funny how they came up with that interpretation, but so many other interactions which are way more common didn't were not included in the
yeah,
rules
for sure.
reference. I mean, I was convinced that you would treat Cagliari like the fog situation, but then when the other player, and I can't remember who it was now, but when they said you're giving control to the hunter, then I was convinced otherwise, because that's not Dracula should not be, hunter should not have control in that situation.
Yeah, sure.
And then you came up with the interpretation that we've got here. You came up with it. Another tournament admin came up with it, and then I asked two other members of the community who are really active on Board Game Geek in terms of talking about rule discrepancies and all that sort of thing. And all of you, independently of each other, came up with this ruling. So that was where I was really happy to go, all right, I was in the wrong. Let's do it this way. And there will be probably people who will disagree with this, but I think again, it's one of these where we're having to try and look at the existing rules and try and work out how we interpret this. I'm happy with this.
Yeah,
if we find
I'd
some
agree.
other argument that contradicts it and is a more compelling argument, okay. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
for
this is
sure.
better than it was before.
Yeah. If
And
there's any
again,
like authorities on the rules or anyone who's definitely more confident, I'm always open to my mind being changed on these.
yeah, same. But again, at the same time, it's not. Even though, yeah, you might disagree with it, but how often is bats played on Cagliari? Not very often.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not going to be a huge deal. It's going to affect not even 1% of games. We're looking at fractions of a percent of games, so it's not a big deal. Night supply prompts just saying that there's a danger that you're taking it from the bottom of the deck. That's nice, just
Yeah.
for people to be aware, especially if they're a player who's not aware of the physical board game, or maybe they've skipped the tutorial or something. I think that's nice. Players who control multiple hunters now have only one mute button. Okay, so this is a thing that you added very recently. There's an update where you could then mute spectators in the game if they're being, or even players if they're being annoying in the
Yep.
chat. Now
Yep.
you don't have to mute 4 times. You can just
Yeah.
mute once and it's
Well,
done.
I believe it worked where if you clicked mute on any of the hunters which were controlled by the player, they would be muted, but you could
Ah.
mute them more than once, I suppose, if they're being really, really annoying.
Wow, that's a new insult. Get quadruple muted.
Get
Oh,
mega
yeah.
muted.
Okay, some things here about the AI. Again, doesn't affect online play, but there's so AI
Yeah.
Dracula doesn't get trapped. I did notice it's not in the update, but I did notice there's a thing when you go into local games where the AI now has different settings, E and M, and I assume easy, medium, hard. It wasn't yourself, Eredra, but one of the other developers was talking. It was maybe something that was from a previous update that was in the works, but then didn't get completed, or maybe during the PlayStation version or something along those lines.
Yeah, something similar. The AI is honestly a constant, somewhat tweaking and ongoing thing where it's far from perfect.
Mm.
But hopefully, every time it gets iterated upon, we can make it more enjoyable to play against. And the difficulties was a thing which was not released prior to this update. I believe they do have significantly different behaviors. Like I think the hard difficulty hunters, for example, I think they do actually sit around and supply during the day and reserve tickets during the night in for the first couple of days at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do that. So there is a difference, but yeah, I don't think it was actually mentioned in the change logs. Now I look at it.
No, it wasn't. And that's why I was really surprised. There was another player. I just mentioned it to me. I was like, "Oh, I'm seeing all these things to the AI." I was like, "They haven't done anything to the AI. What are you talking about?" And then I checked, and it is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we talked about it, Tom, in the previous video we did. It's just so hard with this AI because there's so much like hidden information. How does the AI use that information? And that's something that
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
a human can do it because a human then has to make logical choices based upon hidden information rather than just knowing the information exists.
Yeah, you have to make educated guesses, and like we've discussed already, there's certain people that will take risks, and there's certain people that won't. And depending on that situation, is it right to take that risk? Like leaving that up to the AI means that there's a lot of different information the AI needs to consider, and sometimes when there's that much information to consider, it can do something that doesn't seem like it's taking the right priorities into account.
Yeah, I agree. It's good. I think the AI is great to sort of learn the game and get used to things, but yeah, I mean, against humans, it's
yeah,
the way to
that's the
go.
way.
So if you're playing against the AI, come and join the community. There's loads of people who want to play games
Yes.
with you. Encounter card source hideout is now displayed if hide is involved. Ooh, explain.
Yeah, that's not really well worded
Stuff.
actually in hindsight. But generally,
Don't worry.
if a hideout is being searched or ambushed by or on a hunter, and hide is involved, so maybe if you're searching Madrid, and it's got hide attached to it, um, the cards when you choose which order to search or ambush them in, there's now a bit of text underneath the card itself on the left side of the dialogue, which tells you is this in Madrid or is it in hide.
Okay, so it's not okay, yes, because the way it used to be done was the location card encounters were on the left, or like the first ones you'd see, and then when you cycled like to the right of the list, then you got to the hide ones. So now it has the name.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Uh,
Because again, it's very easy to mix up if you don't know it. Because on the trail it's presented, for obvious reasons, the trail is presented the other way round, because the trail slides from left to right. So the
yeah.
hide card is furthest left, but then when you look at it in the ambush or search, especially during the search dialog box, the hide is actually behind, and that might be easy to mix up. And again, if you're trying to stake vampires and all this stuff, I've seen it being done wrong so many times. And it's just one less thing, when as a tournament organizer, I had to produce this document to tell new players, make sure you stake things in this order. And obviously this document became, very, very long, and people don't want to read through that. So the fact there's more information in the game, then that the amount that players have to read before tournaments and stuff just gets reduced considerably. That just makes it a better experience for
Yeah.
everybody. And you're not having to remember the information either, the information's there.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, now there's another one. Yeah, recent one. Spectators now. So if you join an online lobby, but you only want to spectate, because you hadn't selected a hunter or a Dracula role, the game wasn't able to start. Whereas now, the game could be started. So how does this work? When you go into the lobby, do you have to say I want to be a spectator, or you just select nothing?
There's no extra step. So let's say three people join a lobby, one player selects all hunters, one player selects Dracula, the other player just doesn't select anything. And if the game begins, then they'll be assigned to be a spectator.
Nice. Because the problem we used to have was then if we're trying to record tournament games from a third person perspective, we'd have to wait for the game to start, which is not a big deal. Not really. But still, then it meant that we couldn't start recording or whatever until before that. And then if it was a private game where the game is hidden, we had no idea. So then the players would have to message on Discord and say, oh, the game started. And again, then it means they're jumping in and out of the game. It's not a big deal, but it's just having that little bit. It's more fluid. It's just gonna be nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so there's another one with just planned ambush now. The fact that if you accidentally misclick and say that you want to change your card, but then you realize you don't want to change the card once you actually see all your array of items and things, because you can't view the items during that dialogue box, then it just means you can reselect the card if you want. I know that's not how planned ambush technically works, but it's just that it evolved. It basically means that there's no misclicks will happen. You can get around that problem. So
Yeah. It's just an ease of use thing.
yeah,
Being more accepting of mistakes, like you say.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's not going to. Most players will use planned ambush correctly, so it's not going to affect much. But just on the one occasion you misclick, the cards will be available for you. Especially if you've got multiple planned ambushes in a fight, you might in the heat of the moment forget which hunters have which items and which planned ambush you're doing. So it makes it a little bit easier. Viewing information no longer gets interrupted when another player performs an action which uses the same dialogue. In terms of like things getting blocked. I assume viewing discard power when right, yeah, I've had it before when I'm viewing an item discard power, then another player does something and I literally cannot scroll through the discard power or anything.
Yeah. If you're viewing a discard pile and someone else, supplies or reserves a ticket or something which uses the same thing, it would override your viewing of the discard pile and show you something else, and you'd have to re-click on the discard pile. So now it uses two separate dialogues where I believe the discard pile or whichever one you opened is shown first, so that you choose when you stop viewing something.
And then
Yeah.
once you've clicked out of that, do you then see the hunter action even if it was done, say, 10 seconds ago, or do you miss the action?
Right now, it's you. If you're viewing something and something happens behind the dialogue, you miss it unless you close quickly. So I
Okay.
suppose yes, it is somewhat been placed on the players to not miss things, but
I think if you're taking the time to browse through the like the discard pile, for example, you need to account for the fact that things are still going on while you're doing that.
I suppose this is a bit of a deviation from how a lot of the game is kind of done, and now you've highlighted this, because a lot of the way the game is done is it's pretty difficult to miss things in the game
Yeah.
if you're just looking at the screen. A lot of, like, that's what a lot of the dialogues are. They just pop up and say, okay, this is now the hunter's ally, this is no longer the hunter's ally, excuse me, things like that. But I suppose in this way, it's now possible to miss something if you're choosing to look at something else, which might be a bit of a concern.
So maybe I don't know how easy to read the code, but it could be a way like there are some prompts which, as a spectator, I've not necessarily thought of something I'm going to give you feedback on, but I'll do it afterwards. If you're like spectating something, if you don't click OK for say a minute, then suddenly all the previous actions that the hunter has done or Dracula has done suddenly whiz across the screen very quickly. Is it a way that you can maybe do it like this? Like when you go into the discard pile, you'd have to click like an OK to get out of it. I know that's creating another click, which you don't really want to do, but then you see the action repeated, or not repeated, but then it shows you that action that was done, say, 20 seconds ago.
I imagine it might be a bit simpler, at least from our perspective, to perhaps somehow await your closing of the dialogue, and then we'll show, so nothing goes on in the background at all until you finish closing your dialogue.
Or something like that. Yeah, it only shows you it once you've closed it. Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, you'd still miss players moving, characters moving on the board. You'd still miss that. So maybe it's a little bit more complicated, perhaps, than I initially thought for this change.
Because there's one bit of feedback that somebody gave in the Discord, which was like a log of all the actions that were taken. I was initially dismissive of this idea because I don't want, as a player, I'm not interested in scrolling through all the actions that were done. In a case like this, that might be helpful. If you're viewing something and something's hidden from you, you can quickly pick up like a little like text box or something, and it shows you what the actions have been during that time that you're looking at the discard pile. Again, then you're having to implement something else. So yeah, I don't know.
Want to think about.
Yeah, exactly. We can put it on the. We can put a pin in it. Yeah, come back to it. Then the other ones we got here in terms of like it was a discussion that we've been having quite a lot in terms of in the community and also in the background in terms of in the digital edition there's a lot of waiting for prompts in certain moments of the game, and I perfectly understand why these prompts exist because you want to make sure that players know something's happening, a player is thinking or whatever. But the thing is, there are certain prompts that reveal information. So dawn on dusk prompts, for example, and because you're having to cycle through all the hunters, so you can you can basically count the number of dawn or dusk events that a hunter has. If Dracula has a card that's played at the end of the Dracula phase, that reveals information. So they get a Dracula card, you start saying, oh, right, they've got something that activated at the end of the Dracula phase. Right, what ones would they be? Unearthly Swiftness, Darkness Returns, blah, blah, blah. And you can start eliminating. And that's information that is being revealed, which shouldn't be revealed. So there are a lot of these prompts are being either reduced or I've realized they've been obscured behind a very basic prompt. I saw it in the game I played yesterday or a couple of days ago where it said, we're waiting for the hunter to do dawn actions. But we don't know how many dawn actions there are, or even if there are any.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. The ones which are obscure right now, as we can see already, is that if a hunter is being ambushed before combat and at dawn or dusk, the dialogue will always show, the waiting for will always show, and it won't change depending on what the hunters choose to do.
Yeah.
Especially for Dracula. This is merely just for Dracula to not find out information.
And also then from hunters in terms of like what Dracula has. And again, it does maybe reveal some information. If they click that prompt screen like really quickly, then you probably know, they probably don't have the dawn event. But then again, there's an idea here for bluffing. As a hunter, if I've got no dawn event, I might maybe sit there for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds before continuing with the process of dawn. So then Dracula's going, oh wait, maybe they have got renewed vigor. Which again, in the real board game, that's what you can do. You can bluff your way through dawn and dust prompts and things.
The way this is implemented does not use a timer, so basically players can, like most of the dialogues all of the dialogues when they're making a decision of some kind, it doesn't rush them. We're quite concerned about rushing people in this way. Maybe there's some situations where they need to choose something where they've got 4 cards and need to consider carefully what they do, and there's not enough time to do that in maybe however many seconds. We don't want the time that we'd give them to be too long, because then the game would get drawn out a lot more. Don't want it to be too short, so they don't get rushed. So we thought we'll just keep it consistent with how the rest of the game is, and just give them infinite time. And the only tell that Dracula gains from that, or anyone gains from that, if it's on the opposite side, is how long they take to make the decision.
Yeah, and I think that's how it would be in the physical board game, right? You're having to, by the way that the play. I know we play 1v1, which is not the natural way to play the game. It's supposed to be done as a community-based thing where Dracula can listen in, but it's the same thing where Dracula's then gaining information, potentially the way that hunters are taking time to think about their decisions. That's the one. That's
Yeah.
probably the decision I spend the most time thinking about in a game. I generally try to play games quite quickly, not to expend a lot of energy, because when games become very long, it's very easy to get tired and then you make mistakes. But the one I always think really carefully on is, do I want to play Renewed Vigor and Speedy Telegraph here? And especially
Yeah.
now with the fact where I can see the map a lot more, I'll be able to make better judgments in terms of where to play those cards, because that could potentially win the game for you if you get that right. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that point, but I think it's nice. I think the one that we were talking about, the only prompt which could potentially cause issues are going to be like the interrupting cards, like an Enraged or
Yeah.
Sensationalist Press or something like that. But
Yeah, there's quite a few, unfortunately, especially on Dracula's side, which we haven't really, we haven't released yet about our method of obscuring those. Yeah, as you say, it's mainly just interrupting flows where one player on one side is doing something, and then someone else on the opposite opposing faction has the option to do something like false press, false tip, sensationalist press,
oh yeah, false
rage,
tip, perfect.
uh,
Or Wild Horses,
yeah,
for
wild
example.
horses. Yeah, exactly. These kind
Yeah,
of things. A little bit more complicated. We don't want to. We're really hesitant to add a similar method that we've used already here for Dawn and Dusk, for example, to every time a hunter moves, or every time a hunter moves and crosses a country border, or things like that. It
Yeah.
would become too much.
oh man,
Easily.
that dragged the game out a lot. That would make it worse.
Yeah.
You don't want to regress, even though you're going to hide information. You don't want to then regress in terms of the overall experience. It's not, in my opinion, it's not worth it to do that. I'd rather have it. And then again, also too, like if most of the problems are going to be from Dracula events, well, Dracula events don't get drawn or don't get drawn very much. So
I
it's
suppose.
not going to be the most, the things, the prompts which have been dealt with now, those happen in all games. There's always going to be ambushes, always going to be combats, always going to be done in Dawn and Dusk events. Um, so yeah, if the only ones we can't really deal with are then things like uh, Dracula events, who would interrupt certain actions. Again, I'm not overly concerned. If we find a solution, one way or the other, from feedback or from you or whatever, perfect. But otherwise, I'm not. Again, it's moving in the right direction. Even if it's not getting there 100%, it's moving in the right way. Um, and I think, yeah,
Yeah, we'll still try to consider it.
say again. The
Sorry, I was just saying we'll still try to consider a nuanced way to deal with the interrupt stuff, but
Yeah.
for now, we don't want to go with the method we've implemented already with Dawn and
No,
Dusk, because we don't
no,
think it's correct.
and I think that's very sensible. I think that was the thing I was talking about. We were talking about in the Discord. I was getting really worried that this game would just then collapse down into this constant like waiting for prompts which are not necessary.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I think right decision was made on that. Okay. Whoa, that's a lot of fixes.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna
So
say,
I don't.
do we want to condense the fixes discussion into one big lump? Because we've talked for
Yeah,
2 hours and change at this point.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, most of this is just referring to like little, mostly bugs. They're not like rule implementation things. They're more like, I'm looking here, like, encounters targeting things when they shouldn't be. I think the really big one from a player I really want to focus on is Forewarned, wherever it is. I'm trying to find Forewarned. Where is
I think
that?
it's on your cursor, or it was just
Oh, it
now.
was. Oh, goodness me. I should probably. Oh, there you go. Forewarned. Right. This is the biggest one for me as a player. All the others, again, yeah, there's important stuff. But again, Forewarned is such a critical card for hunters to have. And the original way that it was done was if you've got an encounter card that is multiple hunter target, like a Fog or Sagani Mob, any hunter on the space could cancel it with a forewarned, even if they're not the ones moving into the space to get ambushed. And I think it was you, Eredra, who went through the rules, and you found a very specific sentence in there that clearly states that hunters are ambushed one at a time. So the one that walks in has to get hit first. So they are the one who has to have the forewarned in order to stop the effect of the encounter. So from me as a perspective, this is huge, because now you can't just, if you're walking to a location where you think there's fog, you can just put forewarned onto the first character who's going to walk in, and then Dracula basically cannot ambush, because if he ambushes the first hunter, it gets cancelled with forewarned, and all the other hunters pile in, and they ambush with fog, forewarned will cancel it, regardless of who is walking in. Whereas now, there's going to be a lot more sort of bluffing, and the way Rakajic sort of described it is active gameplay, where Dracula's going to be thinking, who has the forewarned? Who do I ambush with this fog, or mob, or whatever, non-vampire encounter it is? And then same as the hunters, you're going to have to be thinking, which hunter do I put forewarned on? If you get 2 hunters in without an ambush, but the third hunter doesn't have forewarned, do you even move in that third hunter? Do you risk the 2v1 combat, or you try to get the third hunter in there, but then they might get hit with forewarned? So there's going to be a lot more interactive gameplay and a lot more bluffing involved, which is just going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I think a lot more fog of war will be introduced with this change, combined with the fact that Dracula should no longer be able to tell when a hunter has forewarned by a prompt.
Yes.
So they won't even know if any hunter has forewarned at all. So there'll be a lot more in the dark.
The only way they'll be able to tell is then by the number of supplies that a hunter has done, and then potentially trades, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is massive. So that just is going to create a huge. And for me, I can't remember when I did a video where I was comparing all the hunter events. I don't know where I put forewarned. I think I can't remember if I put it A tier or S tier. I think now this definitely takes it down. I'm not saying it's not rubbish. It's a very good card, but it's gonna. It's not just a blanket now S tier. It's going to require a lot more work and strategy to make sure you get it right in terms of the timing of when you ambush and then who has the forewarned, which is just
more interesting, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything from this
I
lot
was
that you want
about to say there's probably one more fix that we can talk about that's quite interesting.
Go for it.
So it's the one that is currently right at the bottom of your screen.
Oh.
The fixed the ambient audio for being in a port city when Dracula is not revealed. So, do you know about this, Scot-sword?
I do not. Oh, this is intriguing. Oh, do tell.
Yes.
This is a reveal if you really want to do this stuff.
Exclusive, exclusive reveal.
It's quite embarrassing, really.
Yeah, I'm happy to reveal this because while we're on this discussion, it seems like the best time to reveal this. So I got a message on Discord privately from a Fury of Dracula player who pointed out that they'd noticed, and I don't know how this had only just been noticed when it was at this stage of changing the beta, but there is in the game, when Dracula moves to different locations, there's like an audio sting. There's like a noise that it makes that's associated with that movement. That audio is slightly different depending on if Dracula moves to a port city or a non-port city. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Edra? Yeah.
That's right.
So the issue is that audio sting was still different even if Dracula hadn't been revealed at that point.
Oh.
So technically, you could.
No deduction, just listen to the music.
Yeah, and you could go, that's a different sting. Dracula's in a port city. You wouldn't know which port city it was, but you would know he was in a port city.
I'll be honest. This might sound very deceptive. I almost didn't want to include this as part of the page logs because I think it would. I think it might make people think, just ruin a lot of people. Like, has someone cheated? Someone must have used this before.
Yeah, like there was a lot of debate about hang on,
like,
is this actually something?
In some situations, especially maybe in like the east of the map, for example, that you can just immediately tell, oh, he's in Constanta or Varna or something similar because he only could have moved to one port city.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really quite embarrassing. This is in the game.
Yeah.
That's
So
incredible.
that one person that noticed it, I massively appreciate the fact that they sent me a private message, because it would be entirely possible for them to go, you know what, I'm not going to tell nobody about this. I'm just going to
You
keep
like
this to
this?
myself,
Wow.
and have that secret knowledge in the back of my head for all of my future Fury of Dracula games. So massive kudos to the person that sent me that message on Discord. Massively
Wow.
appreciate it.
Yeah, very well done, whoever. That's incredible. I had no idea. This is not. There's not just a beta thing. This was a
No, this
live.
is
Yeah, this
yeah,
has been in the game for the past 4 years.
yeah,
Oh man.
yeah.
That's incredible. I had no
Nothing to
idea.
brag about, really.
I guess for a lot of the time, we turn the music down quite a bit, especially if we're in
Yeah,
Discord calls with each other or trying to record or whatever. We want to try to pitch, music volume to. I don't know for people who don't record, but for me, I love the music. Don't get me wrong, but I turn it down so then it balances
Um,
well with the voice. So I had no idea. I didn't pay attention to it.
to be fair, it is. I think it's actually part of the sound effects volume, if I'm not wrong.
Oh.
I believe it's part of the music. Which I'm not sure how many players keep the SFX up or down in the settings, but
Hmm.
I think
yeah.
it's tied to the SFX.
It might be why it's taken so long for someone to actually notice it.
Goodness. There's a lot of sound effects I didn't realize were in the game. But there's one of the players from the New Blood Championship who plays with no music at all, so they only
Yep.
have like the sound effects. And there are loads of sound effects that I'd never heard before. Just because the music is kind of like the dominant sort of sound that you'll hear. Um, so yeah, wow, that's incredible.
You
Very well
heard it
done to
here
the person who
first.
worked that out. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
It is impressive that they figured it out, to be fair, yeah. But shouldn't have been in the game.
No, no,
Well,
good.
none of the things on the fix list should have been, to be fair, but this one especially is a little bit daunting.
I had
Yeah.
no idea. Wow, that's amazing. So there's, as you say, we're not going to go through them all for obvious reasons, but there's so many fixes, and again, a lot of them don't affect the majority of games. It's not like, but still,
Yeah,
there were
it's
things.
it's stuff that's been reported either in the Discord or on the Steam forums
Yeah,
um, many times over the years that have helped us identify exactly what we needed to come back and fix. I think that was the big thing for you,
Yeah,
Ethan,
right.
is being able to come back and say, okay, I don't need to start from scratch on what needs fixing and what's currently an issue. I have a comprehensive list of community reported issues.
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't just stabbing in the dark. Like maybe they've encountered this before, but with the list, I can clearly go through and say this is things that people have already experienced, so they know it's in the game. So these are the priority ones. If there might be other bugs outside of the list which we received, but the priority is working on the list which we've already received.
Yeah.
yeah, perfect. That's absolutely great. And we really appreciate all the work that you have done in terms of going through all this, and yeah, the whole game experience is just gonna be better. We're not constantly thinking as players, oh wait, something might happen here. Oh wait, then that person won because spy ambushed multiple people and all this sort of thing. It's just again moving it in line with how we would expect the cards to be played and how
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, so it's just been fantastic. There's so much stuff. So I'll recommend to people. We won't go any more for obvious reasons, but we'll leave a link in the comments to all of the changes. Obviously, if you're a new player who doesn't know about Digital Edition of Fury of Dracula, then obviously you don't have to worry about any of this, but you can worry about it in terms of there is an active community in terms of reporting bugs, and there's also an active side from from Nomad in terms of looking at them, and if they are able to be replicated and fixed, then they can be replicated and fixed. So there you go. Any last words before we sign off?
Not much from me other than appreciate you taking the time to talk us through and having this nice chat about all the changes that are in the Immortal update. Because we discussed previously, like, oh, we should actually sit down and talk through it because there's so many changes and there's so much that's different thanks to this update. I think it's really worthwhile sitting down and appreciating just how much work has gone into it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I agree with everything. But also, appreciate a lot of the reporting back and bug reports and feedback that we get. and I'm also looking forward to the Immortal Beta Invitational tournament that's coming up.
Yeah,
It's
that's
gonna
right.
be a pleasure to watch. Can't wait.
Oh well, I hope you'll enjoy it. It's gonna be great. Yeah, so people don't know we got a tournament starting. We've kind of organized it sort of internally, so it hasn't been publicized much outside of Discord. But yeah, we've got some. I think we've got 10 or 12 players who are gonna be taking part, all with the Immortal update, with the new trail and everything, and just see what shenanigans we'll come up with, and it's gonna be just really cool just to keep showcasing the update as much as possible.
Oh yeah, we'll be keeping a close eye on the tournaments,
Proceedings.
and everyone's playing the beta. So yeah,
So yeah, so I would say like a huge thanks to both of you for firstly having this chat and for sitting down and talking all about this. You didn't have to. So it's really honoured to be able to talk to you about it and to we were talking about communication and transparency earlier. Like this, just the fact that you've wanted to sit down and spend over 2 hours talking about this game really goes to show sort of like the level of commitment to it and your willingness to sort of be very open about everything.
Yeah, it is a pleasure.
And yeah, I just want to say thanks. I'm here as like purely community representative. I wouldn't have stayed in this community as long as I had would it not have been for the communication I have with like people like yourselves, and then also with all the enthusiasm of the other members of the community. The fact that they've been really responsive to the tournaments and everything that we're trying to organize. I wouldn't have stuck around as long as I have. So to everybody who's in the community who's watching, then thank you very much for all the feedback and playing the game and everything that you do. It's been
Yeah.
fantastic.
I speak for everyone here at Nomad when I say we massively appreciate it.
And
Yeah.
if you're not a member of the community yet, link in the description. Come along, say hi. You'll find you'll find 3 of us and all the other members of the community around. We're all a nice bunch. We'll help you out in terms of teaching you the game, playing you the game. If you want to take part in tournaments, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's fine too. But we're all here. So if you're interested, you can come and check us out.
And don't forget to follow Nomad Games everywhere that you can possibly follow.
Oh yeah,
We're
absolutely.
on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I haven't finished setting up a TikTok yet, but we are going to be getting a TikTok.
Oh.
I just need to figure out how to do that as someone that isn't 12, but I'll get there. We also have a website, a mailing list, so you can sign up for emails from us. Basically, if you want to hear more things from me as the front person of Nomad, just check out Nomad Games. We're pretty much everywhere as Nomad Games. So yeah.
Without a doubt, on your version of this video, you'll leave all the links. I will make sure in the description of my video there'll be all of your social media links, so anyone
Perfect.
you can go and find you. You got your monthly newsletter as well. Which is really cool.
We do, yes.
All
Yeah, we do a
Nomad.
monthly studio roundup where we cover everything that's happened at our small studio of the previous month, and we have a monthly mailbag. So if you've got any questions that you want to throw at us here at Nomad, we literally answer each and every question that comes in to questions@nomadgames.co.uk. So if you want to ask us literally anything, we've answered some weird questions in the past, but we're always going to answer them. So yeah.
You'll be pleased though that the question Fury of Dracula update when will not be asked for a very long time.
Oh yes, yes.
That's the reason why you're doing this update, so that the people in the mailbox will just shut up for a bit.
Yeah, trying to get them to calm down on the Fury of Dracula request. Like, we've given you what you want, now leave us alone.
Tom, Eredra, thank you very much. It's been awesome.
You're very
Thank you
welcome.
as well.
Bye for everybody. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.